And I am alive. Welcome to this new reaction to some content online. This is a video that was chosen by the dragon. Hopefully, finger crossed, he will show up at some point. So let's get into it. I will screen share the video and we will get into it. I am very excited about that. The topic, based on the title, is amazing. I didn't see this video prior, so I have no idea what we are getting into. Let's do this. Let's react to that. There we go. Volume at the highest point, normal speed. Let's get into it.
Modern society is artificial, hypocritical, completely saturated with slop, and frankly, miserable. This is a video about the book that saw all of that in 1951.
You know, it's interesting. I do agree with a lot of these things. And it's very easy to be depressed. It's very easy to complain about everything and to see everything with a dark a dark outlook on things. It's very easy. It's very human as well to expect the worst. So yeah, it's kind of dead on. It's spot on what is the premise of what we are getting into. Let's hear more about that video. So, did you ever get fed up? I mean, did you ever get scared that everything was going to go lousy unless you did something? From Olden Caulfield. That name is familiar to me, but I don't really know who that person is. Read the book again, it's all here. Olden Caulfield is only a frozen moment in time. A lot of capture of moment in time are accurate because artists, they get inspired by their living experience most of the time. So yeah, let's react to more.
The Catcher in the Rye is a book of the type that I like to call observing books. These are books that were written by keenly observant authors who were witnessing certain ailments begin to take hold of their worlds, whether it was society at large or just the part of it with which they were most familiar. These authors rarely offer solutions to the problems that they have noticed.
And it's very hard to find solution. Let's be honest about that. Finding solution is a challenging thing because it forces you to think outside the box. But everyone and anyone can look at something and have an opinion. Having opinion is always easier and faster than making up solution. And that's the sad truth. And that's also why some people that find solution can come across as being offensive or heretic. It's because people don't really like thinking outside the box. And it's kind of unfortunate because we are meant to be critical beings, right? This is what divides us from the animal realm. So, a very interesting thing. Let's play more of that video. I'm quite entertained by the start of it, I won't lie. So let's hear more of what she has to say.
Solutions are not really the business of novelists, not always. And even when novelists offer solutions, it's often so oblique that it can't be explicitly seen, at least not until the exact moment it's needed.
And that goes back to what I said, going outside the box. And it's also very easy, again, to be negative on something. I am always negative on pretty much everything and anything. I really try my best to fix that and to have a better outlook on things, but it's challenging. It's very challenging. So let's hear more of what she has to say. And by the way, I've never really read the book, So maybe after watching that video, I might be intrigued and I might end up reading the book. I don't know. Will she sell the book? Well, we will see. So let's get into
Needed.
that.
Observing books differ from dystopian stories. Books like 1984 and Brave New World are offering
1984 is one I must read eventually. I just have so much things going on. That's the only reason why I didn't get my head around reading that. But George Orwell is a massive thinker, and it's fascinating how Orwell was supposed to be a warning to people, and we got politicians, and mostly the globalists and the leftists, that are like, oh, you know what? It's not a warning. It's what the world should be. And it's kind of sad. It's kind of sad. Give power to men and men will abuse it. And when I say men, it also includes women because let's be honest, women are behind a lot of wars as well. They were just not the ones with the weapon, they were the ones pointing the weapon. I don't know which one is worst. Let's play more.
warnings about what current society could become if left uncorrected. Observing books offer no warnings. They are the barefaced truth about what was happening in their times. And to a like minded reader, they come across
So, barefaced truths. I will speak as a Canadian, okay? I am Canadian. This is where my accent is coming from. Uh, the truths, they can offend people. They don't like being told the truth. They like to live in their own parallel dimension, which is kind of fascinating because, again, we are supposed to and we are meant to be free thinkers, except if you're living under a government that use on a daily basis propaganda in many different forms, and maybe that's why Canada don't really like to be told harsh truths because you're offensive, because you're problematic. And I always bring back to Canada because that's my lived experience. So let's hear about what she has to say. So there we go.
like keenly prescient insights into the specific ills plaguing their times and future times. A lot of the time, not always, but a lot of the time, a very well written observing book will accidentally stumble upon precisely the issues that could go on to create the broken society of the
Because again, that goes back to what I said. Some people read something, they don't get the message, they don't get the warning. They see it as a blueprint of what should be. And therefore, if you read something like Orwell 1984, you get a surveillance state and people in charge that shouldn't be in charge in a so-called democracy. So again, it's very interesting how some author, some thinkers, they think and they are clever enough to kind of predict the future. They don't really make up anything because history is made to repeat itself. So a lot of issues we are having today, we used to have them as well in the past in different shape or form. We are just that stupid humans being. We just repeat and repeat mistakes and issues. It is the way it is, and it's kind of sad. And a lot of people will be offended by what I just said. I know it. I know it. It's as simple as that. People are fragile. They just like to be told everything is good, even when the building is burning. It's fascinating, right? It's fascinating. Let's play more of that.
future that its writer could not have foreseen. As an aside, this is why observation is the most powerful tool of any writer. The way I look at it, observing books are kind of the first wave. Society begins to fall ill, and then these sharp eyed souls, these keenly observant creative types, can't help but write stories in which their characters are also observing these hairline fractures and the weight bearing beams of civilization and culture. Later, and sometimes even concurrently, other novelists who have made similar observations, sometimes even bolstered by those of the observing books, will write their dystopian warnings. Of course, there are always the other books, and then there are even the escapist books.
And by the way, sometimes artists they copy each other. They just deliver on another way. They just make up a new things based on the same premise, based on the same foundation as an idea. And it's natural because let's be honest, we cannot invent 300 times the wheel. A lot of artists they are inspired by other artists and they create their own stuff, and we also have other people that are just copycat, and these are not artists in my book. An artist is someone that has seen something and that decides to give his perspective on that thing or to create something more or something different than what the person has seen and did. So it's I could see already where that video is going at. She will mostly talk about how the book she refers to predicted the destruction of society. I think it's a very fun premise. It's a very fun idea. Um, a lot of times people in power they take the wrong lesson, or do they? Maybe they are just power hungry, and that's why they prefer using Orwell as a blueprint than as a warning. Maybe that's what's going on. Maybe it's by design. So let's play more of that.
Books like fantasy or romance, but certain points in history produce the right circumstances to give us exactly the right authors to write that era's observing books. Observing books and the dystopian books of a given era work together to help a society both observe its own ills and also metabolize and adjust to the new normal, for good or ill. For this reason, the very best
I I really don't like to say adjust to the new normal today because I feel like we've put out with so much crap, especially with the cube, because we all know YouTube doesn't like the exact word. They don't. With the cube, we created a new world, and I don't think we should normalize it. Like an entire world online, no thanks. Work from home, is it really work? School from home, is it really school? Maybe it's the future and I'm just not ready and I don't like it. But I really think like each time we are mentioning a new world today, feel like the world from 20 to 30 years ago was far better than what we have right now. And I feel like the politicians should try to bring back the world to where it was before. Or maybe they didn't have enough powers and they just want to keep the grip on power, and that's why they are changing the society and they're like, you peasant, you the pleb, you shall obey. Um so let's play more of her video because that video seems very based thus far.
of these types of books become a source of profound comfort, contrary to what might seem logical, largely because they allow an isolated reader to feel that he or she isn't insane or alone. Moments in history when massive
When it resonates with people, it's always the best form of art. And this is also why artists sometimes they will inspire themselves from other authors. Because the other authors they resonate with them. So they're like, you know what? I will create my own thing based on what I've seen and read. Because I could relate, I could resonate with whatever is told. So a lot of artists they will try to connect with people through ideas that are already out there, and I think it's very fun. It's a good aspect of creation overall, and to be an artist and to maybe start revolution. Remember in the 16th century or the 17th century when we had thinkers thinking against the machine and the so-called kings and queens, they are the reason why we had revolution. And you know what makes me very sad? Society doesn't want them anymore, or I should say, the government doesn't want them anymore. And the comfortable peasant, the pleb, they also don't want these free thinker because they may change everything, they may improve or make the society worse, but because humans are so fragile and easy to scare, they will think if there's change, it can only be worse. Yeah. How's your rent today? Do you think it can be worse if you live in the West? What could be worse? Let's be honest. Like, okay, you have a roof, maybe you will lose it, but let's be honest, if we keep continuing like that, do you really think you will keep your roof if you're so scared to lose your roof? Well, other people did lose their roof. So again, that goes back to what I said. People should stop fearing that things could go worse if they implement change. They should also look at history and what were the cause of destruction of different countries. Like, I don't know, Soviet Union, why they crashed, why the Berlin Wall fell. Do you really look into it? Or why did someone in China stood up in front of a tank in the late 80s? People should learn history, but yet a lot of the establishment want to erase history and pretend it didn't exist, or it's all bad, therefore it's pointless to know. I'm sorry, it's not pointless to know. We should be the ones choosing what to learn because we are free thinkers. It's not the government job to tell you what to think. Yet government, they want that because they want to keep control over the pleb, like kings and the queens. Let's play more of that video. I find that video very interesting. It's it gives a feeling that it's stuff we already know.
Changes occur in society are often met with very quiet waves of profound pain by people who can see what the world is becoming. These books become lifelines to these types of people. J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye observed the world of post-war society in America, and these observations, contrary to what one would believe, were not particularly flattering. We in our times tend to think of post-war America as a kind of paradise.
Uh I'd say it was, and I don't know why it cut off like that. Oh, maybe it's just the screen, but I feel like after a war, it's always better. You know why? People have money. No, it's not the only reason. It's there was a crisis, and people grew stronger out of that crisis if they didn't end up being annihilated. So that's why I think after each war, there's a period in time that's amazing. Why do you think there was a baby boom right after the Second World War? Like, do you think life was so bleak and dark? Do you really think in bleak and dark times people really want to make babies? I don't think so. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know. I don't like. I look around. I see so many people that see that bleak future, and that's a reason for them not wanting kids. Look at who's making the babies. It's the religious people and the people that want to believe there's hope and you can make a better world. It's never the folks that see all the gloomy darkly. And it's kind of funny coming from me because I'm very negative and pessimistic and yet I will have kids. But I strongly believe that future generation, if you teach them well what must be taught, they will be the vehicle for change. They will be the light at the end of the tunnel, the solution to the issue. Because let's be honest, it's always beyond us, especially when we reach a certain age. As you go older, you have less change to impact people because you're closer to die. But future generation, if you set them up well, they could take the arms, they could take the weapon and drive change and revolution. This is what should be, and this, I believe, was what happened in the past and in history. Who led the revolution? The young, the young people. They were forefront and center in the movement of revolution. And I've also heard of a dictatorship somewhere like a few months ago, maybe that's even a year ago. I can't remember where exactly, but there was that really dictatorship like regime that was drowned out by the young, the people between 16 and 25, because this is the peak of someone. This is when you are healthy, this is when you have energy, and a lot of time you don't really have kids, so you have nothing to lose, and you don't have property, you don't have the life that molded you, um, and that's why you are that drive for change. And I also think the idea that these young people can bring revolution is also what the elites in charge fear. And that's why so many years of propaganda told people you shouldn't have kids, it's bad to have kids, we overpopulate the planet. Folks, we will see a lot of demographic shifts in the next 100 years because of what's going on right now. Right now we will have actual minorities, and it's not the minorities you think today. It will be another one, and only story will tell. Anyway, let's play more of the video because I'm curious to hear more.
We had won the war and defeated Big Bad Hitler. There was a lot less crime. Houses were affordable. Families tended to stay together. People had stronger moral fiber. A good education was actually a good education.
And by the way, way back then, you know what was going on? The government wasn't as big as today, and this is what was going on. You know, also what happened? Religion, way back then. As much as I don't really believe in many religion, I can see the bright side of it. And by being with a Christian lady that's amazing, I may start believing myself, and I see the perks of religion. And why is the government so inclined to just kick it out of the power structure? It's because it's competition. They are afraid, they are scared that a higher call or another body will just take over and replace them. I think we should have something right in between, because only having government as the voice is bad. Having only religion as a voice is bad. And we have both. We have Canada that tells you we are a post-nationalist state, and we have regime like Iran that's actually filled with dictators that use religion as the driving force of the power structure there. So it's two polar opposites, you see, and these two polar opposites are really bad. And I really think something in between should be the go-to. But the world is too polarized for that, and that's why we have Iran in Canada. And it's kind of fascinating how a proud Christian country right now is being torn to shreds by bad PR, the USA. Why am I saying that? The Christian government or whatever, it doesn't exist, and that's true. I say that because they don't stand for open border like Canada. They don't say they are a post-nationalist state. And let's be honest, right now, the USA, their focus is not to centralize more power within the president. It's to secure the geopolitical sphere to make sure the USA remains on top. They don't they don't go down on people's right within their own border, except for maybe abortion, and I think it's bad. But uh, they don't pass laws to censor people in the states. Not that I know of. I know there's still a few laws against defamation and that kind of stuff, and you can have lawsuits very easily. But I still believe the USA are strong in the narrative of rule of law, which is something that's no longer in the books of the leftist government. And they also get so much backlash. They arrest illegals. Oh, they are so evil. That's Hitler. Um, Nazi Hitler was dividing people by type. They were like, the Jewish are bad, the black are bad, therefore we will put them in camps and jails. Do you see the same kind of rhetoric from Trump? No, he's only saying the illegals alien. So even if you're a Canadian, which is you're the same color as the American, and you're there illegally, trust me, they will kick you out. They will kick you out because they realize open border doesn't work. So yeah, that's why I think they're still Christian. They still see everyone as truly equals. If they have laws about immigration and they use it, they enforce them. Don't call them fascist. Don't call them whatever. They are applying the rule of law. They are applying the rules of their country. Something the other leftist countries should learn about. Because in the meantime, the UK and Canada, they really want to destroy free speech. Just think about it. Look at the kind of bills and laws. Look at the reputation. Like for the last 3 years, the UK arrested 30 people a day for what they said and posted on the internet. And Canada is hitting toward the exact same. Anyway, let's play more of that video.
But as I've talked about before, a lot of what we in current year know about the past isn't necessarily true, or at least it isn't the whole picture. For Zoomers born into a
I will expand on that. There's always your point of view, my point of view. And the reality is right in between. And we will look into the past. If we didn't live through the past, and we take our source from that person or that person, we will mostly get that person's opinion or that person's opinion. Even when you look at an article from I don't know what year, even if you bring facts, even if it's true what you are saying, it's only natural that we will have bias when we make up something. So even if you're like that journalist that brings the fact and all, you will still sprinkle by accident. It's not even conscious. You will sprinkle your opinion on something. You will bring your truth into the truth, even if it's not something cautious or conscious. Even if it's not something you plan on doing, you will do it because we have our bias as human beings. So if you didn't live through a time, maybe you don't know about that time. And I was speaking about like the king and the queens, and I didn't live that. I feel like it was well documented enough that quick kings and queens were bad. And if they were so good, why aren't they in power anymore? Why were they replaced by parliament? I know the UK still have a king, but the king, let's be honest, is not as powerful as it used to be. And is not as a political figure as he used to be. He is more of a, look, I exist, I represent that country, but I don't really make the rules because it's the elected people that do that. Yes, I let them do that, but you know where I'm getting at, do you? Kings and queens are done, and I think it's because they were bad. And I feel like the current form of government, maybe in 100 or 200 years, they will be thrown out the window. Maybe we'll adopt the China style because the liberal mindset, like so much China. I'm very worried about that, and that's why we need to speak up. We don't want that. Let's speak up. Let's fight. Fight for freedom. Let's play more of that.
world dominated by explicit content addiction, social media addiction, artificiality, AI, isolation and lack of human interaction, mental health and prescription med crises, academic decline.
Whether you like it or not, humans are social beings. And that's why what happened 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I won't say it out loud because YouTube doesn't like it, but that's why all these years ago we broke entire generation. And you know what makes me so sad? They will try again because it worked the first time. But the next time, maybe you will be more compliant. Maybe you will be conditioned and think it's normal. It's not. It's not. We are a social being and the screens are bad. And I say that while I do a YouTube stream with the screen. But still, my point remains that we need warm body. And as much as AI advances at amazing speeds, I don't think they will ever replace actual human. They may start being free thinker, but they will remain programs. They will remain machines. So food for thought, food for thought. Let's play more of that video. And by the way, the economic decline is even harder on leftist country because they believe in centralized power in overtaxation, and the more tax you push on people, the less money they will have, and the less money that's actually injected in the economy, the weaker your economy gets. It's only natural. What if we just lift up taxes? Stop paying for the roads for a year or two. In Canada, you won't see the change because Canada has shitty roads, but maybe people will have more money in their pocket and maybe they will be more inclined to put it in businesses or consumption of diverse things. Maybe you can fight the freaking housing crisis with that. I know it's more complicated, but food for thought. Try something new. Let's play more.
Skyrocketing crime, nightmarish economic situations, and a
skyrocketing crime. Look at the world. Where are the crimes more present? Is it in the USA? I don't know. Now I feel like since they realized, oh, Trump is actually putting away illegals, I am pretty sure a lot of people no longer want to go there because they're afraid they will spend some time in the ICE camp, or they will be kicked out, or whatever, they will be rejected. I feel like when you enforce the law, people tend to listen. This is when you don't enforce the law that people go crazy. It's like when the cats is not around, this is when the building burns. As simple as that. As simple as that. So yeah, I just see that the rise in crime is mostly in the blue states in the USA and mostly in Canada at large. Hell, even Quebec, that's the most isolated part of Canada because of specific laws, also feels the burden of higher crime rates. Freaking Europe. Go anywhere in Europe except for maybe Italy because they're still tracking down on a lot of things. Usually the leftists are the one that let crime loose because they don't care. As long as you can transition your kid, you're fine. As long as no Christian is in power, you're fine. It's okay if it's the Muslim, the religion that killed so many people in the last 30 years. It's fine if it's them. Christian, they didn't do genocide for, 200, 300 years. But yet they're still the big bad guys, right? Right? It's not the Islamists. It's not the regime that keep doing wars and over again like it's freaking the 17th century again. It's not them. No, it's not them. By the way, the extremists, they really like to try to manufacture and create a takeover, a hostile takeover. They want to be on top. They want to be in charge. What did they do in Iran? This is what they did. They took over that structure when there was a power vacuum. Look what it does. If you really look at facts and what's going on, they were bombing the neighboring countries. They were ending people's lives in the streets before the USA said enough is enough. We will start bombing your military capacity. And they took off the head, but there are so many serpents and so many heads that The regime is still there, but it's not as powerful as it used to be, and they basically took control of that area without even placing a military presence there. They just bombed stuff and they sank boats and they took out leaders. So effective. Let's play more of our video.
General hopeless, purposeless existence. The world of the 50s in America might as well have been another planet. Would it then surprise you to know that 1950s America carried the seeds for all of our present social ailments? The post-World War II planet was one that was in a chaotic, unstable, uncertain state of flux. The idea of civilization was changing. The idea of culture was changing. The idea of heroes and idols was changing.
So at that point, to fight off the idea of let's have one race being the Hitler race, the blonde, blue eyes, let's have multicultural experiment to make sure we don't repeat that. And I think at first it was a great idea. I think the foundation is great. You make sure there's no new Hitler. But then once you achieved that multicultural moment, society, and you want to continue and more add on to it, this is when you blow up things. And I think this is what happens. Rewind, I think this is what happens right now. We went way too far with the multicultural worldview. We went too far. The left, Europe, Canada, we went too far. Because it's not enough to give them the same opportunity. Now we should give them more. And when you look at history again, when you create two classes of citizens, that's the best way to create civil war. The best way. Only civil war were created because we had two classes of people. Now, I didn't study history, so I won't make up that thing. I just know it happened. Okay, I've heard about it from so many different sources. I know it happened. But again, this is what we are creating because we went way too far. It's no longer about equality, it's about equity. And equity is bad because you just misplace, you just move around the issue. Who is the oppressed? Who is the oppressor? And I think it's ridiculous. It's disgusting. It's so racist because you're like, oh, you're privileged and that person is underprivileged, therefore we should put you down to elevate that person. It always comes at the expense of someone else. When it's equality, something we should all strive to get. Everyone has the same chance. It doesn't matter who they are. It's the most colorblind thing to do. But when you start speaking about equity, you're sexist and you're racist. That's my opinion. That's all I feel about that BS. DI is ridiculous. Again, it's to divide the people. And who wins when the people are divided? The government. Because when people are divided, they won't team up to overthrow you. They won't. And they know that. And that's why the elites, they want equity. At least on the left. On the left. And that's why the left demonize so much the right, because they're like, meritocracy is bad. And I know a lot of leftists are like, oh, we need equity. You just did drink the Kool-Aid. You want two-class citizenship. And if you argue otherwise, I don't know what you're smoking, but I want some. Let's play more of that.
Idea of family and husband and wife and children and school and hard work and religion and even hope were all changing. And it would be some time before people got a handle on what the new normal would be. A lot of books written in this country in those times spoke of some of these pains, yes, but few of them, perhaps none of them, so perfectly encapsulated not just what was wrong, but what was coming in the way that J.D. Salinger's book did. Just as a highly oversimplified rundown of the ideas here, there might have been less crime in America in the 1950s, but teenage crime was on the rise.
You know why? I know why. They used to have rule of law. Now, as of the teenage crimes, I the only explanation I may have on that is they were more kids, and also during wartime, you may send some brand new adult, so teenager were getting ready for war. I don't know, but like I think they might be a lot of different factor why teenager, and I think peer pressure as well. Um, so the 50s, that would be the boomers when they were baby, but like if you speak about the 60s, then it's just because we got a lot more kids, and that's what causes the fact that, oh, because there's more of them, there's more chances of them becoming criminals. And I don't know, like maybe teenagers back then also experienced the war, but from the outside, and that kind of broke them. And just putting that out there, maybe if one of the reason is daddy died at war, so I only had mommy. Sad, it's bad, but this might be a reason. Because let's be honest, we need both parents, daddy and mommy. It's not always perfect. There are some parents that are bad, even if they are both there. But if you got one missing parent, you will see it, you will feel it. So maybe that's the reason why there was that rise in crime. And you see, today we see parallels. You destroyed the family unit. What happens? More crimes. Crime is on the rise today, especially in Canada, because now mommy or daddy raised the kid alone. The other parents is not there. And it's messy and hard for a kid to grow up with only one of the two parents. Or if you're being pushed around left and right, daddy, mommy, 1 week mommy, 1 week daddy. It's not great for your development because it's not always predictable. It's not the best setting. Food for thought. Crimes, youngster, parental figure, how important they are. Let's play more of that video.
Houses might have been more affordable, but the growing power of the mortgage was going to set up the system that gave us the crash of 2008, and the next crash that's certainly around the corner. Families tended to stay together, maybe, but divorce was on the rise. And meanwhile, things like swinger parties or key parties were growing in popularity, which is to say, the marriage unit might have stayed together, but the union of husband and wife was at.
Because there was a big liberal boom at that point. We didn't want to be as conservative, and Christian are looked upon as being too conservative and maybe too close to what Hitler did, so people got scared, and this is what they started pushing for. They started pushing for change in society, so they are more open-minded. And I think at that point it was amazing. I think the liberal idea, maybe not for the family unit, but the format of society we started getting in the 60s and 70s, where women and men both basically have the same opportunity, is amazing. What they did to the family unit is actually disgusting, and all of the anti-natalist propaganda, I hate it. And I like the idea that people have the choice to have open relationship and all, but I don't believe in open relationship. I think it's ridiculous. It's just people that want to F around without being judged. That's all I feel about that. But the fact that people can do that, I'm fine with it. Like, do you. Be happy. Live your life. As long as you respect your partner. That's how I think and view it. But now, at the point we are in, especially in Canada, and I believe a lot of parts in Europe, probably France as well, um, open relationship are the big trend because people don't want to get attached. They want to only live the moment, and they think the more traditional outlook on relationship is bad. And this is when you start really picturing or depicting the other side. You're not a bad way. This is when you have the polarization of society, and sometimes you create rift. And if the left is in power, then the right may not get back in power because they're so ostracized. So let's play more of our video.
An all-time low. People might have had stronger moral fiber compared to now, but it was declining in those days when postmodernism and moral relativism were becoming increasingly vogue.
And again, I say that it's because of religion. We used to be so religious, and I think Hitler made a very bad look on the right side of the spectrum, and people started being scared that if they embrace too much a religion, they may end up turning extremist like the Nazis. I think this is a big factor. And when you put away religion, I think you slowly forget about morality because a lot of religion have the same message about tolerance, the same message about morality, like what's wrong, what's right. You need to do what's right to earn your heaven or whatever the afterlife is your religion is giving you. So if you have religion as a moral campus, I think people overall do more often than not the right thing, the good thing. And again, I won't nuance there because I know Iran is too far on the religion thing, and they destroy so many lives. So again, it's all about balance. But what they did in the 50s and the 60s, they put religion in jail and they throw away the key. And now some people are claiming back that, and they're trying to free religion from that jail cell. But the left will label these people as extremists. It's sad because if you forget about religion, you create a power vacuum. Who fill that in? The government. Could be a big issue there if there's no power check. Could be big. Let's play more.
And even though you could still get a good education, as Holden Caulfield observed in The Catcher in the Rye, to what end? So you can graduate from your excellent college and plunge yourself into a lifetime of meaningless materialism? That meaningless materialism was probably the hallmark of Western civilization at that time, so much so that even the authors of Japanese observing books like Dazai Osamu and Yukio Mishima noticed the toxic fruits of this infection of Japanese society. Another more recent example of an observing book relevant to any millennials out there is Chuck Palahniuk's Fight Club. For Palahniuk, as any millennial knows, the 90s and early 2000s were changing Western civilization in ways we wouldn't fully appreciate for another 20 years. More than that, Palahniuk was also observing the outcome of similar changes that had carried society from the post-war era, changes from the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s that had brought us to where things were in the late 90s. For instance, Palahniuk was one of the most popular Western writers of the 90s and early aughts to point out in a way that really caught on that our Western society was increasingly a fatherless one. It might have taken a
Okay, I've read, or I should say, I've seen the movie Fight Club. You know what happens there, right? Fight Club, we got someone that develops a split personality that becomes more radicalized and that creates that terror network to change the system because he deemed the system failed him. And who he uses? Fatherless people. Gullible and easy to manipulate folks. So, again, that goes back to what I said a bit earlier. Parents, in general, is so important, daddy, mommy. But you know what happens when the liberals take over? They try to convince you a mother can do a father's job. Not true. They always bring different outlook. And this is reality. Okay? Bring back to reality your leftist friend. My tits, because I do have tits because I'm fat, my tits won't feed my baby I'm about to have. But my wife tits, they can. You know what I can provide to my kids? Security. Because if someone comes in and that's an unwanted person, I will show them the door to remain respectful here. You know where I'm getting at. And my wife might be able to fend for herself, but that won't be her first instinct. That won't be her go to. And biology as well. If it's a guy, a bigger than you will try to be compliant to it, that person behind the back when they don't notice. A guy, well, frontal, like fist fight. Very different approach. And the father, they bring the father perspective, what they see, how they view society. It's very different from lady. Oh, the dragon is there at last.
Oh, I don't know.
Hello there. How are you, man?
I'd say like the never, but
Amazing. So did you downloaded the video?
video. Yes.
Amazing. So right now I'm almost 7 minutes in. I enjoy it. Why did you recommended that? Screen share whenever you're ready.
Second hand. What's her name? I think her name. Sorry, kind of combination. I've been awake, but whatever. Sleeping and napping are a separate thing. But her channel is about narratives. She basically, I came across her. Like I've come across her channel before.
Yeah.
Her channel is like, so she looks at it from a writing perspective. It's and it's normally you have 100% idea of a culture war thing, but a lot of it is like what she has is the fan fiction community is absolutely horrible. But it's actually, well, it goes along the lines of if you didn't grow up in the fan fiction era. So that's where the Twilight stuff comes from.
Interesting. So do you have the video ready so I can screen share? So the dragon is doing the video.
Where did I put it?
He is still searching.
I'm not searching. I had it downloaded. I'm just making sure it got put into the right spot. So you should know. There it is.
So the dragon arrived and we are screen sharing that.
Modern society is artificial.
Okay, so
So some of the stuff, I forget the actual link. Sometimes she does long form content though.
So are we ready to continue where I click
Yeah, you're
pause?
good. Yes.
Perfect. Let's do this.
Out in a way that really caught on that our Western society was increasingly a fatherless one. It might have taken a while, but that got started in the 1950s. Parentlessness in general got started in the 1950s, something else that Salinger observed.
So parentless, it's because what happened? The woman, they more often they used to join the workforce, and when it happens, where do you live? Where do you leave your kids? Either they are left alone without parents, or they are left in a daycare again without parents, and you create so many different issues because again, I said it, a baby, a kid I think to grow up and to be a successful adult eventually, I think that kid needs both parents. Not just dad, not just mom, not some daycare, even if the daycare and
Uh, the idea is the Catcher in the Rye is an old, well, it's like one of those ones you read it during high school through a project majority.
yeah.
So a lot of it, it's not just like take War of the Worlds. So like that's when you're usually introduced in 1984. You're usually introduced to, at least used to be. You would learn about classical literature. Catcher in the Rye, like To Kill a Mockingbird as well. Like you learned about it, but sometimes you forget that what the lessons are. But the actual idea of broken homes, because it was more idea that the woman stayed home and raised the kids, or if she didn't work, because the father could work. Now it's not that the parentless stuff started in the 50s, which is entirely set. Now I push back on that because that's not entirely true. Because the father could work, you could have one person working at a job that and it supports the family. So the thing about you're talking about, it's separate. Now some stuff becomes more apparent by the 60s going into the 70s. 70s is when the actual divorce rate started skyrocketing. So
I guess we can play more now.
In The Catcher in the Rye, only Holden Caulfield's mother makes an appearance, and then Holden only hears her, he doesn't see her, and his father never makes an appearance in the entire book. Almost all the major observing books were incredibly controversial when they came out, and some still are today. Turkey's The Disconnected by Atay, Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho, Dasein is No Longer Human. Many of these books' respective societies seem to take umbrage with their depiction. Ironically, people feared that these books' characters would influence bad behavior in their impressionable young readers. Ironic.
And that brings back what I said. A lot of people that will take the wrong lesson. They won't take the warning. They will see it as a blueprint of what should be done. And again, that goes back to the people. The people sometimes are stupid, and that's human nature, I
you
think.
can look at it as observant. Like the funny thing is, actually seeing this a second time, I realized American Psycho was based on a book. The thing is, American Psycho is most notably for what Christian Bale playing an executive who basically murders on the side of the film, if that's what it's based on. It's not that things are observant as a warning, as they are. Well, the other phrase you hear majority of the time, people who don't know history is doomed to repeat it.
Yeah, I said it. I'm not crazy.
So people who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it.
That's
It goes
true.
like that. The idea is history also there's also the theory history goes in cycles. So the reason why history seems to repeat itself is the same way. Now it's kind of like with the recent film Animal Farm. People like wanted to do an adaptation that burned Angel Studios, basically. But Animal Farm was always a mockery of communism or Marxism. People forget that. H.G. Wells wrote War of the Worlds kind of as an offhand as well. But people legit actually thought the world was ending because radio drama. All right, but at the time it was done over radio. Now stuff like Catcher in the Rye, it's of the one. Like there's extreme. Like sometimes that's why you have like the difference in sci-fis as well. Like you'll see a difference in what sci-fis are. from the 50s and the 60s to like 70s. Like, Isaac Asimov hated Dune, hated Frank Herbert's work. He didn't like it because sci-fi went from being you could predict the future, control the future. Isaac Asimov does I Robot and stuff like that, where you invent the laws of robotics to control the robots. Now, Frank Herbert, on one hand, by the 60s, mid 60s into the 70s, said the future was not as predicted. Hence why later on you also have, besides 1984, you have the idea of cyberpunk being the future. Cyberpunk was initially done in the 80s. You had the Star Trek. The writers each have their own interpretation of what future events look like, because there is a comparison between cyberpunk, which is where one or a couple of corporations buy out a lot of the small corporations and large conglomerates. But there's also 1984 with Newspeak. If that makes sense, Multi. Because
Yes,
a lot of stuff is, it's not observing. Majority of it at the time, the books gave warnings. The only book that is utterly banned, but I think it's the actual blueprint, is Brave New World. Brave New World, people used to say we're moving closer to 1984, but we're moving closer to either Brave New World or Cyberpunk. But no one ever talks about Brave New World.
because it's scary. Let's play more of that now.
Because those who stated these concerns seemed oblivious to the fact that the societies they had built and were trying so stolidly to protect were, in large part, producing these undesirable types of behavior and characteristics, which most of the time is precisely what the authors were trying to convey. But let's return to our topic today, J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye. This is a book that emerged in America when victory and peacetime and prosperity had allowed society to enter a kind of optimistic contentment that blinded people to the reality of life. Culture had already changed and was changing more and more every year. Some changes were good, some were neutral, and some were poison, threatening civilization. Salinger's aim with the book was not, I don't think, to show this to the world. He merely told a story about society as he saw it. However, his observations were so keen and so surgical that readers felt like he had an almost supernatural capacity to understand the growing alienation young people of the time were feeling within this new society.
And you know what's fascinating? It's always the young people that have alienation the most, because they see the world as it is. And the old folks, a lot of times, if they had a good life, even if the life is not as great as their old days, they are used to the comfort they created for themselves. And the young people, the youngster, they didn't get a chance to build their own happiness in a lot of era, a lot of times. Even when times were better, we don't know it until times get worse. And sometimes, again, when you are younger, when you got that fresh set of eyes, when you didn't build an empire or when you didn't build your life, then you more easily see what's wrong with society and what's wrong with people around you. And that's why, again, the young people are the driving factor in revolution. And I think, again, I said it when you were away, but now I'll repeat it. I think part of the reason why government likes so much depopulation is to reduce the risk of having revolts, because there's less young people to push that change. So any thoughts on that, Dragon?
So
There's a lot of reason, but I think
no,
one
there's
of
a
the
book.
reason is
There's
that.
an idea. Well, you don't have to see the book, but you can look it up. Like, there's a Strauss How generational theory. It it's about it goes into the details about how societies function. Um, so Strauss, how like generational theory, I think that's what it's called. Oh, yeah. I keep a bookmark so I never forget it. It goes that there's generations, and the reason why the World War II was fought by the greatest generation is it comes on the heels of a prior like generation cycle. So we recognize them as heroes. So there is prosperity, if that makes sense.
It does.
There is prosperity that it wasn't like that it was more the baby boomers, which are more narcissistic than the greatest generation. Because the idea that how would you put it? The idea is that it's not the greatest generation's fuck up. It's the idea is soft times make soft men, hard times make hard men. The idea is, and that's usually what the greatest generation is, like that style. And it comes from a generational theory. Now, baby boomers grew up in prosperity. They didn't see it. Think of the shows like Mad Men. Mad Men is based on actual office advertisement culture back then. It's not that women had no rights and other things, but it was different times. See, largely American culture was pretty homogenous until about the 60s. Because people often forget not that history jades them. Like, you grow up on Gunsmoke and the Singing Cowboys, basically, not realizing some of them were actually gay. Which isn't, didn't realize most of, even in by time of Star Trek, when Star Trek the original series came out, that George Takei was gay. He never hit that. I mean, in Hollywood, people found out about it. They more or less didn't care. The guy who was Perry Mason was gay. That's a big deal, too. He ain't the only one. Majority of them were there. They'd sometimes start family to keep it hidden.
So,
But
I guess, except if you'd like to add more, we can.
no, it's all good. I'll just say this.
Okay.
There's a lot of like a magical period. Because you gotta bear in mind, it's the baby boomers that fucked it up. There's
Yeah,
actually the
it's
reason.
always them.
Society. Remember, post-war America might have been one of patriotism and shared values and all the rest of that on the surface, but it was also a world of increased alcoholism, nervous conditions, psychoanalysis, casual drug use, sexual promiscuity, pop culture hero worship, complex politics, complex morality, and all the rest of it. This was not a stable or peaceful time, culturally speaking. JFK was assassinated only 12 years after this book came out. And then Vietnam, and then Woodstock, and don't forget the Korean War, the Cold War, the draft, and on and on. For those of you who haven't read it, the story follows troubled kid Holden Caulfield who has just been expelled from Pensy Prep, an exclusive boarding school, because he's flunking 4 of his 5 classes. When I say troubled, I don't mean it how we tend to mean it now. You know, a kid who might end up being the next school shooter. By troubled, I mean that his mind is uneasy. He's depressed.
And I will also add this. If, usually, most of the time, if your parents were around to raise you, most of the time, if they did it right, I don't think you will go out in the school thinking you should shoot them, you should shoot everyone down. Now again, there are some exceptions, I'm sure, in history, because we had so many school shooting and all, but I think at large, when there's a school shooter, the issues are not just at school, they are at home as well. in different shape and form. I might be crazy, but this is what
See,
I strongly think.
this is what people forget. Like, people, the thing about history is I don't mind her channel, but there is a jaded idea of history. Because a lot of history YouTube has turned to be a lot of leftoids. They're either leftoids or they're left leaning. Naturally, historians should not be very left leaning, but like, because there's this idea, by that I mean historians will have a leaning towards one particular ideology because, yes, history is written by the victors. Now, that's something you always have to remember. That is one phrase, and it's a phrase to remember. History is written by the victors.
Yeah, and again, I just want to really enforce that point. If
So,
you raise your kid well, they will not go out in school to shoot people.
but there's the exceptions because
Yeah, there's always exceptions.
people forget that. See, the failings of the greatest generation to the baby boomers is that they got known, which is the generation after the greatest generation, is soft times create soft men. The
That's
60s,
true.
everything was roughly about normal. It's not like the Cold War was not soft time, but it was an age of peace. Because you got to remember, Vietnam, the roots of Vietnam were laid in the late 50s. Basically, we took over for the French. JF 60s, I often say, was the starting of the split in America. It's more or less what we for the longest time. Feminism took root, hippieism took root. A lot of times I've said we are replaying the late 60s at this mid to late 60s at this rate. Because by 68, you had Woodstock, you had a declining period in the war. We had just won the Tet Offensive, but America's stomach for the war had gone away. You had various riots in black communities. Radicals were going everywhere, followed by the 70s, largely because of the people you see in power now grew up in that era. The ones in American politics, unironically, they were the people burning the bras and smoking dope in the back rooms of that period. You have to think about that. Pelosi and all of them. And then it gave rise to the more shattering part is when the divorce rate started skyrocketing. Now, you had outliers like Catcher in the Rye. You had those, but they weren't the actual reality because a lot of women didn't divorce their husbands. I mean, it was culturally still different than the other.
I think it was a way better culture. Anyway, let's play more of that because we have like half an hour left of the video. Let's get into it.
And he doesn't completely understand why. He's unsettled, hopeless, aimless, and purposeless. So instead of waiting for Christmas break to leave school, he decides to leave quietly and return home to New York 3 days early so he can spend those days alone before facing his parents' wrath. However, along the way, he experiences a prolonged, quiet crisis that is impossible to resolve. Salinger probably wasn't trying to say any particular thing with this novel, but he was observing the reality of society. The reality that most people really didn't like to be shown. And as the years marched on and the book only grew in popularity, people of that generation, people who were determined to cling to the idea that everything was fine and society was all normal, Sound familiar? We're eager to condemn, if not the book itself, at least the way in which it was interpreted. While Holden experiences 3 extremely lonely, difficult days in New York, he shares with the reader his observations about the world, about himself, about what he wants for his future, about his friends and the people he dislikes, and about his family. As plots go, not much happens. But it is with these observations that Salinger tells the reader the story he wants to tell, which is a kid losing hope in society and being unable to determine if the fault is with society or himself. In a desperate attempt at survival.
And again, it's interesting. It's always the young people, again, that see what others don't, because they are not yet disillusioned with the world. They see the world as truly it is, or sometimes they see it under a very naive lens because they lack the experience to understand the greater world. So it's very interesting. Any thoughts on what she said up to that point?
Mm. There's the idea of the pre-coming of age story where everyone said the post-war history, the roots were there. But a lot of the times that you're seeing is it takes a root in a generation. Because a lot of people forget a generation, even the Soviets, when they wanted to subvert a population, that's why I said if you ever really wanted long form content, I'd show you what Yuri Bezmenov was saying for you. You need 10 years. Like, you need it. Like, you need 10 to 15 years to do the other parts of the indoctrination.
Yeah, eventually we will get into it, but the first big long form we were doing,
the thing
I already know what long form we are
the
doing.
Yuri
The first one.
Bezmenov stuff is more like, it's more or less like, but it's not that the seeds of discontentment happen. It's not that there was the disillusionment, because it's just like during Vietnam. Soldiers that came home would be spit on. And the idea is you already had a split of it. And the split was there. Like Catcher in the Rye is the more controversial. Like, To Kill a Mockingbird, you could say subtly had racist undertones. Because it's like a small little town. But I use the example of like Mad Men. Most people don't realize Mad Men was a depiction of an advertising office in the time period. So people don't think about that. The issue is itself is people are sometimes hopeless. It's an alternative view. A lot of people don't realize a lot of the ones that became radicals in the 60s grew up under that stuff. And she's partly right. There was a sexual revolution to a degree. But the show Masters of Sex was based on the 2 researchers who, to much people's chagrin, made the modern studies. And even the shows The Masters of Sex actually got it wrong. Partly about him. He basically, while it was approved, did realize he thought to cure homosexuality was shock therapy.
Amazing. The 50s,
right? There's a whole into the 50s, into the 60s. And
it's ridiculous.
Bill Masters, if you've ever seen anything on it.
At least we evolved past that point, I think.
No, there's a point of Bill Masters and Virginia Woolf. Both are it's one of the founding. People forget there was a lot of foundational time stuff in this time, that between the 50s to about the 70s.
It's fascinating how the world changed. Anyway, let's play more of that now.
Near the climax of the novel, Holden decided to abandon everything and run away to the West to become a ranch hand in Colorado so he could earn enough money to build himself a nice cabin in the woods somewhere. Once that was done, he would find himself a nice, like-minded wife, and they would have kids, and they would keep their kids hidden away from the toxicity of modern.
Like-minded wife. You see, that spawns a thought in my mind. It's very complicated to find love when you paralyze society in a way where men and women don't see eye to eye anymore. This is what we are getting now. Um, it's very sad because it's not good for the survival of the human species. It's good for the elites because people are more divided than ever, but it's very bad for birthrights. And when you convince all of the ladies to be progressive and some men disagree, these men will be ostracized by the system and society, and they will be called the far right. And let's be honest, the far right, it doesn't really exist
Um,
anymore.
there's a thing because a lot of what was happening in this time period that gets people, it is uh, a lot of what he people talk about is the idea is the fourth turning was not taught. The book, he wrote the book later on, basically from a history point of view. It wasn't that the era that these people grew up in is magical. You think the society was, the opportunity was there. But it's like, it's very normal. Like Matt Stone and Trey Parker, when they did the Margaritaville episode of South Park, saying, oh, and then it's gone. It's a play upon what the baby boomers had. It's basically like they've been riding high. You could work one or two jobs. Like you think back to your parents. See, I'm 40. Those people, my mother could work a couple of jobs, stay employed. You could literally work at a factory your entire life. You could work at a union, maybe one or two different ones, right?
Yeah,
That's a separate thing. You go to a culture where there's a disconnect because you see this in UK politics now, and you see this, and now there's two parts to millennials. See, Gen Xers are a little bit too rebellious for their own good. That's the Elon Musk of the world, and I'm part of that more.
yeah.
We're too whatever. Millennials have this weird shaded view. Like you have the ability to believe. A lot of their kids who fucked up more than anything else. Because you have like the current generation is going coming up. It's more conservative, but they're not really liberal or conservative. So
A lot of them are just for change to whoever is in power.
like you
Anyway,
have
let's play more of the video.
Modern society. We already know from the opening chapter that he doesn't succeed. The book is written from inside a sanitarium, a mental institution where Holden is being treated while he awaits release back into the real world, which is perhaps the cruelest lesson Salinger has to teach us, but we'll get to that in a minute. It would take several videos to detail all the things Holden noticed, but let's highlight some standouts. Few things irritated Holden Caulfield more than what he calls being phony. The phoniness he describes as examples throughout the book are similar to the two-faced dishonesty that so deeply troubled Yozo, the narrator of Dazai Osamu's No Longer Human. Both he and Caulfield possessed the germs of basic honesty and even integrity, and yet were subjected to a ceaseless torrent of meaningless phoniness from childhood. Both marked this feature of society as the most incomprehensible. Holden even observed that he found it terribly depressing. Dazai's narrator grudgingly embraced this social custom, pretending every day to be something he wasn't, in order to hide the truth he saw every single day. And he regarded
And I think it's something a lot of people can relate to because people pleaser. They will put away all they truly feel just to fit in the mold, just to fit in the bunch, just to be part of the group. And it's kind of sad. And I can see some of these people that are phony, that are reading the book she is talking about, and that can relate and understand where the person is coming from. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's very interesting. People
So there's
pretend. Let me finish. People
yeah.
pretend because it's easier to make friends when you seemingly agree with the bunch. It's just easier. It's just human nature. People don't like clashing ideas. This what's going on. This is sad, but this is human nature. So now you can talk.
So I the interesting thing about a lot of it is people they didn't want people to be nihilist because so there's weird. I see. The the interesting part about when you look at like culture, because the greatest generation secured the stuff you just come across, because you got to look at generational theory. Let me just briefly go over this and show this. The so the idea is every single time we basically you have the artist, the nomad, if this sounds the idea. Most people never want to listen to. See, sometimes understanding you have to take works as see, like I think Catcher in the Rye got misinterpreted by a lot of people. I do believe it's the same. Like if they some more inspirational books get lost. Catcher in a Rye could have been a warning.
Let's play more of that now.
Regarded this as among his greatest shames. Even Holden was paranoid about slipping into this himself. Some reviewers observed this in his repeated insistence to the reader that he really meant whatever it was he was saying. Things like, I mean it, I really do. It was true, it really was. That kind of thing. Over and over and over again. This phony
The more you say something, the less it's likely, because you want to hide your insecurities. You want to hide that maybe it's not like that. Maybe the more I say it, the more I will believe it. And if I start believing it, maybe other people will believe in it. Any thoughts on that, Ryan?
Um, the idea is you see a lot of phoniness. It's kind of odd now. The idea of calling someone a phony, because the thing is, a lot of younger people they don't see like the because it gets really really weird as stuff goes. Because a lot of stuff like Catcher in the Rye does hint at it. Because dominant generations are like what they call prophet, and the other one is heroic. That's the greatest generation. Nomad, then it goes artist. It always goes in this cycle, which is artist is adaptive. So you got to think of it as Gen X gave rise to millennials. The idea that see these cycles do become shorter, but the same way of observing what's fake is you'll see a lot of Gen Xers. It was natural for us to rebel against authority till the pre-millennials, till about 94, because especially late. We question reality.
I like that.
We question more because there is that weird learning, because it's not that we don't trust institutions.
I know I don't.
It's like when you hear about it now, it's like when did the punk people become the establishment? Because this is something you got to think about.
It took them at least 20 to 30 years.
Punk was supposed to be anti-authority, right?
but they became
They became the authority that supports the liberal.
you became what you hated.
And it's the idea that either.
You see yourself being turned into
So, when the
the villain.
idea of calling something a phony, right, is like you see it in social media a ton. Social media.
It's the fakest place you can find.
Well, oh
some
yeah, well,
phony.
social media is YouTube's. Look, there's a lot of fake people in YouTube nowadays. Like, it's easy, but you got to realize the genuine from it. But people think it's real. It's like there's this weird thing about phoniness, because phoniness, if you want authenticity, it's hard to seek. Like, I find it now that, like, I see it with a tinge of not venom. Some people grow up with a chip on their shoulder because there was a downside to the generations that came after. Because Catcher in the Rye was written in 51. That was still riding high from the others. So within 9 years, you had the 60s. You are already going into what would have been the next generation after the greatest generation, or the heroic generation. Because the idea is it was a time of peace, prosperity, some ideas flourish. You might have had unrest at home, but there was the other half that, yes, people convince themselves it's the way of the world. Does that make sense? Because a lot of people fool themselves until you question a reality, and then you become doubtful. But
Let's play more of that now.
And hypocrisy and lack of sincerity, lack of integrity, and ability to face things seriously, all of it wore Holden down very quickly. Contrary to what mid-century lore, the boomer lore, if you'd like, has taught us, being subjected to a constant fire hose of ambient, seemingly harmless, day-to-day artificiality and hypocrisy does not, in fact, build character. For many people, especially those who could have become extraordinary, it has a corrosive effect. Dazai's narrator watched his life crumble despite his best intentions under the unmanageable weight of hopelessness and depression. Holden, 16 years old, standing on the brink of the rest of his life, desperate for purpose and meaning, was distraught at the simple realization that in a world in which everything was fake and meaningless, there was no purpose and probably no future. That probably seemed insane in 1951, right after the Allies had defeated the Nazis and all was presumably right with the world. But look at us now. Kids like Holden, and more specifically novelists like Salinger, clearly saw society's trajectory. Holden didn't see much hope for the future.
And it's kind of fascinating. I I don't understand how in the 50s we can view what comes. Maybe 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 it wasn't as great as people may say it was.
Well, there's
I don't know.
there's a side to history that people often forget. So the side when people think with history is, as I say, history is written by the victors. It's not that people ignore the warnings. They sometimes often, or I say more often than not, will say they think that it's a-okay, basically. They look at it as okay. The trick is, it's not that when you look by the time that Mad Men is set, it's the decay or the last part of that culture there. People don't realize that's a depiction of The Office. That's a depiction of how the culture kind of was. Now, there's an idea of nihilism, because this is something that always got, like, you gotta remember, 50s books in the 50s were sometimes futuristic. you had the idea. Star Trek was mid-60s. You had Isaac Asimov writing books about the future and iRobot, stuff like that, around that shortly period. But the idea itself, right, is maybe times weren't what they were. Because this is why, like, it comes out that they go, oh, yeah, in an ideal world, people actually thought we would be on the moon or we would be living in space by the 90s. Gene Roddenberry, who did Star Trek, there's a whole fundamental foundation of futurism, thought the world was going to end starting in the 80s and into the 90s. He put the end of the world in the 1990s. That's a foundational myth in Star Trek.
That's
The
interesting.
world started to decay in the 80s.
That's true.
Orwell himself, when he wrote his books, Animal Farm, all of that, was very nihilistic. Like, he's known for being comedical bits around, like, Dean Martin, that's the same George Orwell. But he wrote 1984, he wrote Animal Farm. Now, the idea is he was nihilistic as well. The idea, it wasn't as there is a section it wasn't accepted. It's more of the worst what if it happened. And it's not that people don't see it, because the disillusionment was largely shattered by maybe the powers that be. Because you can arguably say, so what, 51, 3 years roughly, probably before Eisenhower's term, I have to look at the exact years. The Korean War had happened, which is the police action on communism started. It was and calling it a war, the Korean War is not a war at all. It's still considered a conflict. So the Korean War was from 1950 to 1950. It was a shattering of a peace. It started off with NATO. It started off as NATO trying to police the expansion of communism. The one thing that people knew at the time was communism was bad.
And that's almost like 40, 50 years ago, and we
Korean,
lost sight of that.
the idea was domino theory. So if you let them grow, but it was a root of a conflict that was seeded in the late 40s, basically.
I think the communists won the Cold War because now they took over Canada and they took over the UK. Anyway, let's play more of that.
And look around. Like Dazai's protagonist in No Longer Human, Holden could see under everyone's mask of fakeness, or phoniness, as he liked to say. And it didn't just irritate him or annoy him, it depressed him. Because Holden could see even if he couldn't understand, just as
And only a man can really be sad about truth not reaching out to people, because they like the cute lies. They don't like you to tell you the truth by experience. I might be wrong. Maybe it's because my progressive ladies in my life, they are different. But I think overall, the truth will always come from men. They are truthful. They don't care about offending people in general, except if you're a leftist.
Oh, so the interesting part is, okay, yeah. So the No Longer Human, I've actually heard of. See, I've heard of this book, but I didn't realize it was that old. See, history and other books I choose to read before, and sometimes political theory. This is more the social. It came out in 1948. It's basically from a perspective of, it's also another book very quoted a lot. It's an inspiration, and in fact, it's kind of an inspiration to Miyazaki and a lot of people who did anime through the period post war. It was based on his notebooks. Uh, it's basically about a guy in post war. Uh, it got published in English, I guess. Publication date was 1948, but in English it got published in 1958. He basically tries to Minecraft himself multiple times.
That's sad.
He basically starts to read. He was in an institution. People forget the institutions. The word queer had different meaning. Like, it was more known as being weird or awkward. So the idea of, we were in a way still lobotomizing people all the way up to the 50s. You still had a culture of institutions where you would. But then again, quoting "no longer human" is, I've always heard it as it's just the worst case scenario. But it's hard to believe, like, if he saw this novel when he was writing it, it's not that Catcher in the Rye, No Longer Human, does get referenced as well. It's because he's living with the choices of his life. That's no longer
Interesting.
human.
Let's play more of that now.
Ozai's protagonist couldn't understand that on a long enough timeline, that fakeness, that artificiality that was infesting society was going to destroy it, and it was going to make life not worth living. Imagine being 16, without much support from your parents, without much of anything real or stable to hang on to in society, or your family, or your life, and then you begin to see that, and you begin to realize that. I would imagine that most of you don't have to imagine. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Our current generation of low desire Zoomers are exactly what Holden and Salinger sensed was coming. Holden sensed it in himself, and it terrified him and depressed him. To him, giving into the hollow world that was waiting for him on the other side of a college education would be like walking off a cliff. Of course, there were many other observations Holden made. He saw how the world had become more and more obsessed with inconsequential, meaningless sex, even himself, and he believed Hollywood's slop was partly to blame. He also
I agree, and I will continue on that. I think one of the reason people are unhappy now in relationship, it's because they are sold a lie. They are told, "Oh, you can sleep around without any consequence." But did you forget you release hormones? Did you forget the purpose of reproduction, or I should say, bedroom fun? At first, it was to create family. Now it's just for meaningless pleasure. It's no longer for the greater call to have a new generation to raise. And now that the ladies have so many ways to stop uh, pregnancy, um, they think it's of no consequence. But in reality, all of these
Um,
pills, let me finish, all of these pills, all of that medication they are taking, it has side effect. There are always consequence to what you are doing. So that culture we created around bedroom fun is actually very harmful, and I think it's the root cause of a lot of the issues between man and woman. And now you can talk.
I would arguably say there was also what you see as an evolution of psychological theory around this time period as well. Because, as I said, around by the mid 50s to the 60s, you had what was the sexual revolution to a degree. See, usually when people think there's enough children, like A lot of these people, farmers had multiple children, so they would inherit the land and also have people there working on the land. Because the mortality rate of children was worse. There was the idea as well that people didn't live long enough. Because even during World War II, right, they were really hesitant to send people off to war if you were an only child. Because the War Department, like the reason why Saving Private Ryan is based on a real thing was post, uh, like, so on the after the sinking of the Indianapolis, four brothers decided to sign up and serve on the same ship. Like two or three of them died. That's a generation of an entire family's future lineage lost. And this is a generation they valued because mortality was different. Everything was different. And then at one point they tried to say, well, if a sibling could serve, you could do it, but you don't get yourself killed. Because that's why in Saving Private Ryan, they forget to show the example that comes from the example of the War Department. After that, they started breaking up siblings serving together. So entire future generations weren't lost. Now, that's something that's forgotten about because you always need people having kids or going to the next generation. And a lot of stuff it goes with the idea soft times make soft men or idealism.
Okay, well,
Does that make sense? Does that?
Yes, it
It's
does.
a very weird idea because given a culture, you can be free thinkers. You can be free thinkers. A lot of this stuff is like Gen Xers were taught there was enough people on the planet at the time. We didn't need to have a lot of kids. Come to find out, years later, the reason why China nuked its one-child policy, it used to be one child, two child, three children. Now, the problem is most societies are getting elderly. Like Japan, the reason why they have until about 2030 to reverse this, the Japanese birth rate on average is one or below.
That's sad.
They are at like barely at one child now. And that's because of the cultural salary work that they do the majority of their lives. Or that people warn the rest of the world if you do not reverse a trend. See, America's happy with two children, three children, kind of thing. But meanwhile, Indians, Arabic people have as many children as they can. Basically,
And African as well, if not
Africa
religious.
as well, but it doesn't mean there is success. People
Yeah.
think there was because in the 90s, there were a lot of women who believed they could work. Then they could go live the Sex and the City lifestyle.
But that's a damn lie.
And then have that. Because I remember they're coming up on an entire age group of, we're looking at one of the biggest generation of single cat ladies coming up. Sheer nihilism in the first wave of millennials. Now, they don't talk about that in culture. A lot of women, they're egg timers. You're seeing a lot of the Melanie Max of the world. The Pokemanes. Like Pokemane herself kind of is jesting about this now. She's almost 30. She's not married. Her parents are asking, her mother's asking, will she be married?
I would be surprised if that's actually a person on a lie.
She's not married. Melanie Mack's an example.
Well,
She was
maybe she
about
is.
30.
She just doesn't say it because
No, she isn't. No. It's pretty much confirmed.
Why? Is it going from her? Is it going from his hater?
Everyone around her. She can't keep a stable relationship. It's kind of like, look at what happened with Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift finally settled down and got married.
Yeah.
Like, because she goes, oh, her egg timer's starting to do. A lot of people, reality is thought they could work, because what people traditionally did was they would start a family younger, then work. But the 90s happened, then people started to reverse this trend, which is really weird, right?
Yeah.
They started to reverse it, where they said, okay, we're going to be able to work. A whole generation took the wrong lessons from a Sex in the City. Some people who were second wave feminists didn't want to have kids. Third wave, no. There were the people who thought we were going to be, by this time, overpopulated. The fact alone, we're heading towards an underpopulation.
Oops, maybe.
But at the same time, the system also, people didn't take into account the system. So one of the reasons why what we think is the baby boomers, they got used to having union pensions. It takes 4 to 5 workers working to support that one pensioner.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. A lot of these people thought these systems were going to stay in place. A lot of people thought, oh, you're always going to have one person at a job, 5 workers to support that pensioner in retirement. Realistically, no. Other times happen, and then you start to see it, because it's what ultimately is undoing a lot of boomer policies, so to speak, actually is that philosophy. Because it's nihilism that was warned about, but it was the worst case. But you got to bear in mind, too, in this time period this book was written, or afterwards, you have, and I remind people of this, Eisenhower's parting speech. The only thing people seem to remember from it is the military-industrial complex. But Eisenhower's parting speech to America was more than that. He also had a part in there about how government should function, how people should vote. It should be a responsible vote. Because it is very notable in history. Eisenhower did not like Kennedy, but not for the reasons people think. Eisenhower was not a Republican, not a Democrat, because everyone wanted him to run. He ran as a Republican, arguably created the highway system for military, under the guise of military, in a bunch of things. He said a responsible voting public needed to be smart and intelligent, needed to know the topics. That's one part people will forget about that speech. What is the problem with social media when it comes to election time? They only look at the recent stuff or the rhetoric said, right?
Yeah.
That's all they look at. They don't look at the issues entirely. See, if you look at the representation of leadership, the decay was warned about, but people don't observe it. It was observed because we haven't had a political. See, you have an entire group of people who hate a political class. This is like the decay we're seeing now. Obama was more a professor in chief. Donald Trump was a answer to Obama
Yeah. And we
because
needed that. It
the
also an
last
answer to Biden, to be honest.
and here's the thing. That's why I've often said the last president we really had that was of a political class, but was George Bush fought with Vice President Dick Cheney. Because that is how long we've been separated. Because a lot of those people, because what happens is when you get the other types of leaders in, they don't understand the minutia of politics or the culture.
It's
And
like
these,
Mark Carney.
yeah, well, you gotta look at
Doesn't know how to negotiate.
because look, the people who vote, because most people you were probably never taught Eisenhower's parting speech. Most people were, because Eisenhower's parting speech, even my mother was. The thing about Eisenhower's parting speech, it has multiple parts to it. It's not just the military industrial complex, it's the responsible voting public. Because there's also the thing of being hopeful for the future in it. Because, yes, but you're also looking at this time period was a peaceful period. Not that people predicted by the mid 60s when you had sheer
Anyway,
prosperity.
I think we should play more because I see time flies and it kind of goes in
So saw
circles.
that plugging into the Hollywood slot machine was a kind of willful anesthetic against the hollowness of daily life, and that depressed him. That is to say, brain rot was something that really bothered him, and he even saw the effects of it in himself. Holden also perceived, though he had no way to articulate it explicitly, a kind of diminishing masculinity, or one that felt itself needing to overcompensate for some reason. Men had to show off their masculinity in phony ways rather than just behaving like men. And he also noticed the social and cultural
Oh, by the way, fun fact for people who see this. The idea of the manosphere being a product of about 5 years ago, that shit started in the earth. Well, it started around 2010, like middle of the late. I say it started out as a dating bro tip advice around 2000, early 2000s or 2000, early 2010s, because the idea of men were no longer men. Like, there was the whole idea. The joke amongst Gen Xers and early millennials was we would dress casual. You don't wear a suit. Like, there's something I hear this out of Carlo Benjamin, by the way. Like the idea of fake masculinity and masculinity disappearing. It's not unusual. It's a decay in the culture that you didn't have father figures. Most you also got to realize the same culture that produced that is what was called latchkey culture. Latchkey children. Basically, both of our parents sometimes worked. And guess what? We came home to empty homes. And a note on the thing, there would be a period you would come home, nobody was there. And then it'd be one parent there sometimes, or two. Very rare it was two parents. You saw the decay of dinner culture and that. So kids often had to learn masculinity, learn it from their teachers and culture around. Does this sound familiar to what he was talking about in Catcher in the Rye?
Yeah.
Disillusion. 90s had a very good part, but it was also very hopeful because it takes a village to raise a child. If somebody is not providing a father figure or a mother figure, you could usually find it at a church. You could find it at a school. That's usually that's a very decaying thing. So you continue.
Preoccupation with things. Materialism seemed to be the main driving goal for most people, and to him that was profoundly hollow and empty. Sure, he wanted to be able to provide for a family, but he could see that there was no need for a Harvard business degree or a job at a corporate law firm to do that. It seemed to him that most people pursued elite educations for status, and so that they could drive the latest Cadillac or otherwise show off their wealth. That was peak phoniness to Holden Caulfield. And on and on. If you haven't, I suggest reading the book. It's remarkably insightful, and as I'm sure you can see, a bit prescient. At the time it came out, a lot of young people resonated with Holden Caulfield. Teenagers at that time could sense the rot in the glittering society of the 1950s and 60s, and like Holden, they felt the hopelessness, the despair, the desire to leave it behind. This naturally bothered people. Peter J. Sang, alarmed not just by the insane, widespread mega popularity of the book that had persisted then for a full decade, but also by the way it was being read, set out in an essay in the December 1961 edition of College English to correct what he deemed to be widespread misinterpretation. To him, he found it not just false but also dangerous that people were seeing in Holden someone whose observations might have some merit. Sang thought it was bad that anyone could see Holden as anything other than a dumb, bad, immature kid refusing to come to terms with the adult world. An adult world which was, Sang would have us believe, totally fine and normal and even good. He goes as far as to twist various scenes into painting Holden as someone who merely hated old age and old people, despite the fact that he had great respect for respectable older people, even if he found some of their habits weird, like sitting around with their hairy, wrinkly chests exposed. I don't know, maybe Sang was mad because he liked sitting around with his hairy, wrinkly chest exposed. Sang claimed that Holden didn't see his own faults. Meanwhile, on every other page, he's describing yet another shortcoming or flaw of his that he acknowledges and tries to combat. The fact that he's a coward, the fact that he's aimless and purposeless, the fact that he's a spendthrift, the fact that he gets too wrapped up in his emotions, the fact that
Again, all of these things she describes is something that's very relatable to a lot of people. We all went through all of the things she said, and maybe this is why we are still talking about that book, about that person's experience. It's because it resonates. People can relate and understand and agree. It's fascinating. I like that. Let's
See,
continue.
the reason why literature stays, like, what culturally gets people, like, why Lord of the Rings is popular, Dune's popular.
It's timeless.
It's more or less because Dune is basically, at its core, space feudalism. And because the fundamental disconnect is an example, I mentioned why Isaac Asimov did not like Frank Herbert's work. It was because the fact that Isaac Asimov felt that Isaac Asimov thought the future could be controlled. This is in the embedded into the Foundation novels, the Foundation series that the very popular.
Yeah.
Everybody likes knowing it, but they don't know the origins of it. He felt that the future could be controlled. Frank Herbert's style of science fiction that was coming up the mid 60s, early 70s contradicted that idea. He said that the future is unknowingly because it's also like that's why like Dune's story is timeless because it's a controlled society and then what happens, it's like going to the beach and you squeeze sand in your fingers, something squeezes the sand squeezes through it because the future cannot be entirely controlled. That was a very weird, it's like there was a lot of stuff that happened between this. Because, like the guy saying by 61, it was a negative influence. There is a whole thing you cling to the past, but you also look to the future. But there's also a lot of sometimes misinterpretation. And misinterpretation largely goes ignored. They see it's like Christians read the Bible, but different sects of the religion draw different parts of it. It's the same way with classical literature. It's the same way with American literature at the time. But very few people get taught what the actual literature means. Because, like, example, and we can move along after this. I was taught in school Manifest Destiny in America was both good and bad. We basically committed the same sin in Manifest Destiny that every other nation in the world did. But also, I was taught the Native Americans were not peaceful. They were, in fact, savages. It wasn't the white man that did it to them. They did it themselves. We just became a part of it. They were killing each other long before we got to the New World.
It's human nature to
that's actually the
assert
weird
dominance
part.
by shooting each other.
Or by the thing about it is, but when you see interpretations now, people think, especially even as far back when Shogun got re-released, they showed the Japanese in Shogun's series that came out last year as they were. They were a savage culture. And entirely. They didn't need Europeans to show that.
They were ending their own lives out of honor. Like, it's violent.
They were killing each other long. And the thing is, Europeans, that's the one thing. The idea, later people will do not want to believe. They believe the myth of the noble savage. But a large majority of this disillusionment with society does create misinterpretations of great works. Now, granted, the issue now is at least by the 60s. The people who went... Now, I will say this too. There was no difference between being a factory worker, a plumber, than being that. They tell kids to go to college to have a PhD. You're finding out a lot of this, all these people have these degrees, they can't get a job. Meanwhile, guess what's suffering? The factory workers, the electrician, the journeyman careers. I remember as a decade ago, it was hard. I was talking with a guy. He was a professor or a teacher at a school. He lived in Portugal. He couldn't find a good, reliable plumber. The funny part about this is people did not want to go into the fields of, like, if you couldn't go to college to get a 4-year degree, go get yourself a tech degree. Electrician, welders. That type of stuff will pay as much, if not more. Weird, huh?
Yeah. Let's play more now.
He's oversexed. If anything, an honest reading of the text would reveal that Holden is too hard on himself and too willing to overlook the flaws of others. Sang's insane analysis goes on to paint Holden as someone entirely different from how he was clearly and explicitly written. Here's an example. Early in the book, Holden learns that his sexually aggressive roommate is going on a date with Jane, a girl Holden knew from childhood, and this causes him tremendous anxiety. Sang accuses Holden of being upset merely because, Sang claimed, Holden believed Jane was his own property. Whereas in the text, it was plain as day that Holden was worried for Jane because his roommate had a tendency to violate boundaries and get aggressive with dates, and he feared for that with Jane, who was a sensitive girl, which was actually a pattern with Holden. He hated it when people had their innocence manipulated and their vulnerability violated. But Sang's analysis isn't a surprise. After all, like so many characters in Salinger's book, adult and teenager alike, he wasn't listening. I could go on and on, listing all of the willful, deliberate misreadings Sang made of the text in order to make it fit his narrative, misreadings which were common then and still are today, but I think it's most important to understand what that narrative was. Sang believed, falsely, obviously, that Holden hated adults. Full stop.
And I'll also say this: narrative is also more important than reality in a lot of progressive case, in a lot of situation where you'd like to change opinions. So how do you do it? You make a narrative around something instead of truly showing the true colors of said thing. And I guess this is something that happens quite often. So I guess now we can play more.
Stop. And that Holden hated the perfectly fine and normal adult world because it was made up of adults, whom he hated, for no more reason than that they were adults. This, according to Sang, accounted for Holden's hatred of things like phoniness, over-sexualization, materialism, and so on. He only hated them because they were adult things, and Holden hated adults like some kind of a weirdo. Look at this freak, he just hates adults. Adults are perfect, what's his problem? Does any of this sound familiar to anyone? Sang also said that this explained Holden's fixation on the goodness of children. When any fool was hooked on...
So the idea is you look at your parents as the ideal role models. If you question,
if you have parents.
So here's the thing. Let's assume you come from we're seeing this happen in culture now. Like, I think I had my mother ask me, why do they show multicultural ads or whatever else? Let's assume you come from a broken home, divorced. You want to marry the right woman or the right man, and then not have a divorce because you don't want to make the mistakes your parents made. Let's assume that in reality, your parents were drug addicts or alcoholic. You do not want to mirror that in your life. It's very much, you don't want to repeat the generational thing, because the problem is why parents usually start being hated by their children is their own hypocrisy. And this is something I learned. I look at both of my parents and I see mistakes. But then again, I was raised by my grandparents, which were formative. So parents sometimes saw that there was always a person to correct that. But when you have nihilism about your upbringing, you have two paths. Do you want to repeat the mistakes your parents made? Or do you want to become a better human?
Let's become better, folks. The way to do it. So let's play more of that video.
Phonics can read the same book Sang read and see that Holden's admiration for children was in their innocence and their lack of artificiality or pretense. He admired this wherever he saw it, whether in...
It depends. Like, I know lots of kids that will actually make a narrative that doesn't offend anyone, and that's mostly like with girls. Like my sister is like that. Like, She won't necessarily lie to you, but she won't be honest either. Like she will try to dodge his question to not
Status
offend.
quo.
Yeah,
That's a really good way of saying it. People like the status quo.
yeah, and even kids get that. It's fascinating. Um, let's play more of that. And again, that goes back to what I said. Narrative matters. Whoever is putting out the story as a message or an agenda through the message, and
children
that's
or
what matters.
adults, and he did encounter a few adults who were like this. Although Sang refers to these adults as children surrogates, because to Peter Sang, and one assumes many, many others, being genuine and making an effort to be free of pretense or phoniness was the mark of a child. Was it that Sang didn't read the same book I did, or was something else going on there? Sang's anxious reframing of the novel reveals two things about his generation. First, they didn't understand the book or its protagonist because, like many characters that Holden interacted with, none of them listened to him. They merely interpreted his words to fit the narrative that pleased them. Second, Sang and his generation were eager to quash
Narrative
any
matters.
rising dissatisfaction.
And it's kind of funny how people make their own narrative, even if you try to tell them something, they just don't listen. It's like talking to a damn wall. It's kind of sad. So let's play more of that.
Satisfaction with the status quo. To the boomer generation, life literally could not have been better than it was in the years when Salinger's book was experiencing its first surge of culture-defining popularity. Sang and his generation would be the ones to mortgage the nation into shocking amounts of debt while basking in so-called prosperity that would leave their children and their children's children with a husk of a future. The boomer
I hate this philosophy. So Arch has recently been on this kick about it, but you have to understand to reiterate this. It's basically there's an idea of the system. Okay, Social Security and social safety nets were put into place by people like FDR, who was largely still a progressive, very super progressive person, one of the last progressive presidents we had prior to the modern era. The idea was they instituted that it was going to be around forever. Entitlements are the same way. Now, you see this in a culture. Now, mortgaging your future or your children's future has been a philosophy since, because there was a period of, let's say, the 60s shattered this myth. But it took about 20 years for people to see their children, the baby boomers' children, are the ones who fucked that up. Mortgaging the future and holding the IOUs, even as of this year, borrowing against your social programs that you have to take more out of a budget to cover it. It's been the same way. It's been an economic policy hoping that the next generation of politicians can be successful and add to it. The reason why some of the boomers that are beginning to die out, they don't see it entirely as the whole system is failing. You're going on 2 generations where pension programs are not being funded. Basically, you cannot count on Social Security being there forever. And then everybody got on social services thinking you have a whole bunch of people. Like there's a whole cultural aspect to this. 2, 3 generations down the line, let's assume people are living to 75. A generation is 15, 20 years. So within that lifetime, you're seeing 3 generations go by. You're forgetting the lessons. You're forgetting the mechanisms that keep it in place. And I've said this. We're seeing the live destruction within this decade or the next decade of basically the framework of what was the liberal world order that has been in place since World War II, beginning to fall apart. The thing is, this is what people are misinterpreting. They're misinterpreting what arises to the plot. This is why I say the times we're living in is very similar to the 60s. Think about it, Multi. Black Lives Matter, riots, racism, rise in it, anti Semitism. We're seeing regression. But what comes out of this, and meanwhile, we're still being led by politicians who are in their 80s, 70s, or 80s. For God's sakes, in America, a politician, he's been up there, was in DC for nearly 20 something years. We're getting, that's not the leadership we would have saw 20 years ago. Politicians retired, businessmen retired, narcissism took over. There's a whole thing. People forget this. We're starting to see the worst in it all. Tell me if I'm wrong, Multi. Politicians shouldn't be a career. We're seeing the same politicians all our lives. So, Multi, or yes, you back?
Generation didn't understand why their kids didn't think that their wildly materialistic, increasingly debauched post-war America wasn't the Garden of Eden that they thought it was. As the book took hold in America, it even became required reading in some schools, which I think is insane. This is a difficult book and a mature one, and not one I would require anyone to read, especially your average teenager. Sometimes I think they made it required reading so future generations would come to hate it instead of relating to it. But anyway, some parents took issue with it being in schools, which is certainly their right, but their problems with it were mainly that Holden was a bad role model because he refused to accept reality and he refused to grow up. Holden was critical of their world, and so he was bad. An article written in 1970.
That goes back to what I said. Usually, kids are the ones that see stuff adults don't see. And the adult, a lot of them like the status quo. And this is what happens when you have another idea that clashes with what you consider being the perfect world. This is what you get. If you offend someone, they won't like what you offer. As simple as that. Human, they like to be in group. They are social. They like to all agree on something. And that's why we are so tribal about everything. And that's why when we have a very polarized society, it's really hard to connect people with each other. And it's kind of tragic. It's sad, but I think it's been like that forever now. Let's play more of the video. The very tribal nature of human is fascinating.
76 highlighted an idea that socially adjusted adults reading the book had begun to fixate on, that Holden was merely feeling alienated from society. In this type of story, alienation from society stories have existed for a long time. Stories like Steppenwolf by Hermann Hesse, The Metamorphosis by Kafka, a lot of the work of Albert Camus, Buddenbrooks, Notes from the Underground, and so on and so on. Almost always, these types of stories are thought of and spoken about within this nice, safe, contained subgenre, alienation from society, which allows people, I think, to believe that this is a problem more with the person than anything else, as if such a thing is an affliction that can randomly infect the person and is otherwise entirely neutral. There is hardly ever any real discourse about the nature of the society from which the character feels alienated. And that's the most important element of any story of this type. That 1976 article was a psychology article that tied Holden Caulfield in so many weird psychological knots that all amounted to how he felt was just more or less his own problem and had nothing to do with the reality in which he was forced to live. Because, of course, the alternative is that something is wrong with the world, too. And that's a thought that cannot be tolerated. My guess is that many of you already have heard things here that sound familiar, things that sound like the very issues you personally have encountered in your lives. Holden's observations and the bizarre and strangely telling ways in which they were willfully misinterpreted are...
It's only strange to someone that don't necessarily agree, or someone that gets offended, or someone that is a wall. Like I said before, when you try to speak to someone that's captured in some ideology, sometimes you just face a wall. And it's fascinating. Anyway, let's play more of that.
Still immensely relevant today, and it would seem they grow more and more relevant with each passing generation. Any Zoomer today, and most of the rest of us too, have experienced an increasingly hopeless outlook, not just in terms of financial stability or job prospects, but in a world where 5-year-olds are getting addicted to adult content and most adults are also addicted to it to some degree, a world where parents never take responsibility for their children, where the state
You know why? You know they don't take responsibility of child. They also don't take responsibility of their own actions. So how can you take responsibility of a kid if you cannot hold yourself accountable, or in some case the government? Because if the government keep having bad behavior and yet you don't hold them accountable, will you really hold yourself accountable while your image of yourself is very dear and important to you? Um, Again, people, they should take a lot more accountability, and I think that would solve a lot of issues. And let's be honest, and trusting your kid with the state is what I consider a very big mistake. Now, of course, it's a case by case. A lot of people don't really have a choice, and it's very sad this is where we are at now, that people are stripped away from the choice on whether they take care of their own kids or not. I think it's a big tragedy in the modern world, to be honest. And why are so many activists in schools and daycare? It's another big issue. It's unfortunate. And again, the state doesn't want people to think for themselves. The state only wants people to fall in line. Therefore, the state will never do what's best for you. They'll do what's best for them. And it's disgusting. And this is why it's so sad that people are forced into entrusting their kids, the future, into a state that doesn't want a bright future. They still want a grip on power, because give power to human, they will abuse it. Let's play more of that video.
goes out of its way to make sure kids and then teenagers and then young adults all get smashed and hammered into the exact same worker drone, where even a really, really good job isn't going to allow you to afford a mortgage, where social media is the only real life most people come into contact with, where people can't even talk to each other anymore, much less.
And I think one of the big causes of that is the youth. You know, when we were all sick because the World Organization Health wanted to lock down people because they wanted to see how far they could go before people rise up and stand up for freedom. And not every country decided to fight back, which is another very sad thing. So again, I think the virtual was there for quite some time, but the big coup that happened 6 years ago is one of the biggest factors why society has changed so much. And it's by design, it's disgusting. And when you put screen in front of everyone, you also impact their brain. You can more easily brainwash someone that is always on the screen than someone that reads, or someone that go outside and touch some grass. It's so sad, but that's what's going on. That's why they want you to be numb by the virtual, the outside of the reality realm. And again, it's very sad, and it only helps the establishment and the people in power because you're brainwashed. You don't really touch grass. And I just circle around. Let's play more of that now.
Get to know each other, where materialism is shoved down our throats as the ultimate cure, where the tiniest flicker of dissatisfaction is medicated into oblivion.
it's the ultimate thing because this is what the industry want. The industry want your money. The industry, they're telling you, look how shiny this is. Spend some money. Spend some money, make the economy run. This is exactly what's going on. This is reality. This is why we have run more materialistic, because we are easy to influence. Because influencers are wearing this or that because they buy this or that, you will want the same thing. It's a new form of peer pressure. And it's kind of sad, again, sad. This is where we are heading at. But we can fight if we know there's something wrong. Well, that's the big question. Do we know? Or those who know are the ones that are called conspiracionists, because this is a word thrown out so much around. Because the establishment is scared of people making you think critically about what's going on around you. The establishment doesn't want smart people, they want NPCs and the brainwashed, the sheep, the easy to use, because it's easy to control. Let's play more of that video now.
Suffice to say, society doesn't look great. The world isn't exactly glowing with hope. Young people are increasingly rejecting this society. They're rejecting the rat race and the hollowed out husk of future that the boomer generation left them. Young people are more and more looking to the West, metaphorically, and thinking about leaving all this garbage behind, like Holden, to build a cabin in the woods. Nevertheless, our own generation has proven itself eager to share in the condemnations of Holden Caulfield, and for much the same reason. In 2009, Jennifer Schussler wrote a rather scathing denunciation of the novel in the New York Times titled, "Get a Life, Holden Caulfield." In it, she insists that modern teenagers don't talk about the things Holden talked about anymore. Sure, that sounds right. Modern teenagers aren't worried about people everywhere being fake. They aren't tired of rampant over-sexualization. They aren't struggling to find some point to their futures. They aren't disgusted by materialism. They don't admire genuineness or integrity. They aren't rejecting the educational rat race. Yeah, okay, Jennifer. As is typical of boomers of every generation, because every generation has boomers, people like Jennifer Schussler would have us believe that Holden Caulfield and Holden's present-day admirers are insane and aberrant for having problems with the nation.
Again, the narrative works, and to debunk any dissidents is to assert more power and to make sure the establishment doesn't change. And the people that are on top will remain on top. The people that find advantage will keep these advantage. The people that have a false idea of what's going on won't see their ideas being crushed and their ego being damaged. Because a lot of people that thinks they know best have massive ego. And this is what we are dealing with a lot of globalist freaks and a lot of boomers, because they think they know best. Because they know best. The way it is. Let's play more of that now.
Nature of modern society. Like Peter sang in 1961, Schussler seems to think that drugging yourself and distracting yourself into accepting reality is the only real way to get a life. Schussler even posited that Holden Caulfield might not have felt as alienated today. After all, he would have had a multi-billion-dollar entertainment super complex to keep him nice and distracted. Yeah, she really said that. I guess she missed the multiple times in the book he said he hated Hollywood because they were all phonies. Boy, I bet Schussler loves TikTok. Feeling a little uncertain about society's ills? Here you go, the latest iPhone loaded with the best the world has to offer and brain-rotting slop served up in infinite...
Numb yourself. Don't think. Thinking is bad for your health. I'm joking. Don't take that literal first degree, folks. I think I will agree with the person. You need to accept the truth the way it is, not the way you wished it to be. I repeat, someone I ate. Marxist carney. Anyway, let's play more of that. The more I hear about the book, the more I want to read it, because I think it's dead on. It's spot on what's going on post.
quantities in the palm of your hand. There, I fixed Holden Caulfield. Her essay includes a collection of testimonials from teachers who insist that their students think Holden is lame. I'm sure they do. A surprising number of people every generation are just like Sang and Schussler and several teenage characters in the book. They have no idea what Holden's issues were. They don't understand what it was that he hated so much about society. Funnily enough, I bet all of those teachers do have students who relate to Holden, despite the fact that they claimed they don't. Not that any of those teachers would have listened to them or paid attention to them, and probably would have pretended they weren't there. After all,
speak to the wall. It goes into a deaf ear. This is what's going on. A lot of the people that are okay with the status quos, they don't like clashing ideas. Therefore, they will pretend there is none. The best way to have no competition is to pretend there's none. It's so sad, but this is what's going on, and this is why totalitarian ideas are so spread out in the West, because they don't want to be questioned. They just want power. Keep voting for me. I know best. I know what you don't. I'm a globalist. Amazing. Let's play more of that now, because it's quite interesting and relatable.
those are the problem children who probably just need a higher dose of slop and SSRIs. As Schussler says, these days, teenagers seem more interested in getting into Harvard than in flunking out of Penn State Prep. Young people, with their compulsive text messaging and hyperactive pop culture metabolism, are more enchanted by wide-eyed, Quidditch-playing Harry Potter of Hogwarts. Maybe. But maybe that's also exactly what Holden was talking about. People these days, just as in Holden's day, are completely caught up in the rat race of, who's going to get into the good schools, and who's going to make the most money, and whose Instagram account is going to amass the most
prestige, social credit, reputation, gossip. It's always easier to speak about superficial things than to question actual issues and what's going on. It's always easier to say, oh, I went to that school, therefore I'm better than you. It's pretentious, but this is what we are dealing with. Let's play more of that now.
followers, and whose yoga pants are the tightest, and who has the most, whatever you call it, conquests on Tinder. And whenever that gets to feel a little empty, whenever the haze clears just a little and people look up and realize that, I don't know, inflation is so bad they're never going to be able to buy a house, or they're never going to be out of debt, or they're never going to be able to connect with another human being in real life, they can just plug themselves into the latest corporate slop to turn off their brains for a while, which is increasingly becoming just whatever the latest iteration of Harry Potter there is currently airing. Schussler reads like someone who would have fit in well with the fake, narcissistic phonies whose eyes glazed over the second Holden tried to explain what he was thinking. A person whose primary interest is whether or not they're getting into Harvard while also reading Harry Potter for the 28th time is probably not Salinger's target audience, but rather is exactly the type of person who makes up the society that Salinger was critiquing. People like Schussler mock
the drones are everywhere. Everywhere. It's not exaggeration. Look around, you will find drones. You will find NPCs. You will find people that don't really follow what's going on. And they don't want to think about it. They just want to live it. And it's a bit sad because it creates so much issues. Like Canada turning into a totalitarian state. Yes, I said it. It's coming down the pipe. And in the next 20 years, if we don't change course, Canada is cooked, and we will be North Korea, but with freaking snow. This is my prediction if we don't change course. I always bring back Canada because this is what I know, and I feel like it reflects very well how we destroyed our country in the last 10 to actually 15 years. I won't lie, 10 to 15 years. We tore it apart. We dig a big hole and we jumped in it, and the state will try to bury it. So let's play more of that video now.
Holden for wanting to go off and build himself a cabin in the forest. Meanwhile, they've got 7,485 pictures saved to their cottagecore Pinterest boards. Who's the fake, pretentious one here? She closes the essay with a triumphant mic drop, a quote from a 15-year-old student from Long Island. "Oh, we all hated Holden in my class. We just wanted to tell him, shut up and take your Prozac." I guess the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Don't
A
break
review
my
published
illusion! I like the Matrix. I like being plugged in it, and I like to pretend there's nothing wrong, and yet the building burns. I
So the
said that several
interesting
times.
part about he uses he so she is using an author, because I don't know why I had to look up. I was listening, like I had to go look up the author of that piece. Yeah, Jennifer Susha. She is known for writing a lot of really shit pieces over the years while working at the New York Times, and it doesn't surprise me she has this take. She's been kind of the not status quo bent for a while. So in this take of it's not the be the part of the Matrix kind of group versus its.
So let's play more of that now.
in 1951, when the book was released, said that Holden's three-day tale was, quote, "in essence, the tragic story of a problem child, unless, indeed, it's an indictment of a problem world," marking this as one of the only adult reviews of the book that glimpsed through the teenage swagger and relentless stream of consciousness of Holden's insightful, if childish, inner thoughts, and saw something else. Reading this book is like picking up a time capsule of what this part of the world was really like immediately after World War II. And I don't mean the celebrations and the euphoric, triumphant national pride. All of that was there, and none of it was bad, in all honesty. But underneath that, in the parts of the world that were mainly only seen by children, and mainly only children who, like Holden, were precocious and sensitive to hypocrisies and contradictions, there was growing something else. The world had changed with the two world wars. Society as it was prior to the First World War not only didn't exist anymore, it had faded from memory. But what society was going to become wouldn't really be visible until Holden's generation grew up, and even more so when their children grew up, and then too when their children grew up. The changes that Holden was noticing, details about the world that were ugly or worrying, these were set to doom future generations. But because Holden, and maybe even Salinger, couldn't know what we in 2026 know, these things came through then as little more than a simple, brutally honest story. But to us now, it's almost too chilling to read. Just as some more examples of these observations, the book is filled to overflowing with people who might talk to each other more than we do now, but it doesn't really matter because they don't listen to each other, making it basically the exact same as current year. There are people who only care about how they're seen or what image they're presenting to the world and whether or not they're admired or desired. Holden calls this behavior, of course, phony and despises it. But when people sacrifice their own ideals or their own principles in the name of this phony desire to be seen a certain way, it actually depresses him. People don't listen to each other. People don't connect. Sure, social media turned this problem up to 11, but it didn't create it.
And social media also makes sure you remain in your bubble, in your echo chamber, because it's good for the click and the retention. It's all about algorithm. What do you like to hear and see? Now, it's kind of hilarious. I say that, and I live in Canada, where the RTC, the government, and in freaking internet is trying to manipulate algorithm to make sure you see the left everywhere, even if you hate it, even if you try to ignore it. They want to shove it down your throat because the internet is a new weapon to convey the narrative and the agenda of the government if you have a government that wants full control over you. I don't know what's better, having echo chambers or having that echo chamber being decided by the government. I will let the people from the free world think about that while we play more of the video. Let's get into it.
When he tried to tell a girl he was with the troubling observations he'd made about the world, she repeatedly told him to stop shouting, despite the fact that he wasn't shouting, which indicated that she didn't want to
She was offended. She is the wall that they're trying to break through. She is the echo chamber that doesn't want to be pierced.
hear it. Telling him to stop shouting was her way of telling him to shut up. He was saying things that were making her really uncomfortable because they were pulling back the veil of the world in which she had grown complacent and comfortable in her phoniness and her misery, and he needed to shut up. This pattern was repeated throughout the book. In the world of post-war America, a person's outward appearance, a person's social status was all anyone had. Culture and community were dying. Family was less and less important. Your bond with your spouse was less and less important. Your devotion to your children was less and less important. Friendships were mainly built on who impresses you with their material possessions, their things, their fancy cars or their club memberships, and who can get things for you, not on anything real. Every friend Holden tried to talk to in a genuine way, like the girl I mentioned before, didn't care about anything he had to say unless it gave them an opportunity to show off, or unless it bothered them. Narcissism had already taken hold. Social media would turn it into a monster, but the seeds of it were already sprouting in Holden's time, and seeing them made him miserable. Another fascinating and weirdly prescient observation made by Salinger with the story was mental health. Early on in the book, Holden recounts the events surrounding his beloved brother's sudden, shocking death from pneumonia. He tells the reader how that night he went out into the garage and punched out all the windows and even tried to punch out the windows in the car, injuring his hand. He didn't really remember doing it, and looking back on it, he thought it was a pretty stupid thing to do. But how did his parents react? Did they maybe try to talk to their son about the profound grief and shock he was feeling? Did they try to comfort him or help him find a healthy release for all the pent-up emotion that was smothering him? No, they wanted to send him to a shrink. Probably the shrink would medicate him, get him hopped up on some Quaaludes or whatever they were peddling in the 1950s before they had the magic cure-all, Prosium 2, SSRIs, and then he'd stop being so damn human, maybe turn into a nice docile zombie, and his parents would...
The government likes the zombies. The journalists like the zombies because at least they can create fake outrage about that person that thinks outside the box. Because let's blast the people that think it's outside the box because they will clash with my idea, with my worldview. I don't want anything to clash with my worldview. This is how a lot of people think, and it's unfortunate. It's sad. This is not how we should go or do things in a free world or a free country. No, we shouldn't be doing that. We should let other people argue for something else. It's the only way we will keep a system where opinion matter and where the elite are not the one that dictate what's going on in the plot. So I know a lot of leftists will be irritated and they will turn off the stream. I don't care. I'm here to deliver my truth, a bit like Holden right now. So let's play more of the Juicy because it's fascinating. I like it.
Be able to focus on more important things, like themselves. This attitude toward parenting was just getting off the ground in the post-war era, but we can all see where it has led. Moreover, as I mentioned before, we found out in the beginning of the book that the events of these 3 fateful days have led to Holden being institutionalized in a sanitarium. Call me crazy, but I don't see anything particularly insane about him in the book, or even unstable. He wants to reject the miserable realities of society, leave school, and work to save up enough money to build his own cabin somewhere quiet and peaceful. Is that unrealistic? In 1951, definitely not. It might not directly address the pain he has in him, but is a much better option than medication and institutions, I'll say that much. And it was an active solution.
And it was also far better than numbing yourself in fake stuff or irrelevant things or phony attitude toward things. It's far better to have your opinion than to follow the masses. The ones that lose in all of that are the ones that just follow blindly someone else or a group. It's so sad. We are free thinker. We should be able, without being ostracized, to think outside the box in a free world if we truly want a free world. And again, this clashes with a lot of the leftists that are now preaching and that the government to add censorship and to silence dissidents, because why not? If they can, they should, right? Right? It's like saying, if you can take a life, do it. No, it shouldn't be like that. Sad, but this is what we are living through. Reality and the clashes with it. Let's play more of the video now.
Perfect, but it involved doing something with his hands in order to alleviate the helplessness that was crushing him. In current year, everyone in the world is running around talking about how we need to touch grass and get back to nature and real life. Maybe Holden was actually completely right about the solution, but as usual, no one listened to him. Plopping 16-year-old Holden in a sanitarium because he doesn't want to be exactly like all the fake drone pod people he sees every single day is borderline cruelty. But it's an example of what has been happening ever since then. A kid comes along who sees through all the, pardon me, bullshit, and he has to be medicated and therapied until he's just like all of the other little drones. It's sad and kind of heartbreaking, but it has become the norm in modern society. Feeling a little unhappy with how terrible everything is? Here, have a pill. Feeling a little anxious about your future in a world where normal people will literally never be able to afford buying a house ever again? Here, have another pill. Feeling a little uneasy with the rampant over-sexualization out there? You're definitely going to need another pill. What was it that Marilyn Manson said?
Take the blue pill. F the red pill, you know? We embrace the matrix without questioning it. Let's just be pawns because it's easier. You don't need to think. You just need to follow the masses, even if they move toward the cliff. Let's be honest. If the establishment is not challenged, the establishment will go too far. Because again, give power to someone. He will abuse that power. It's human nature. It's as simple as that. And that's why we need accountability again. And we need to enforce it the best we can. Let's stop being offended about like holding someone accountable or a government holding it accountable. Even if you agree with the government, hold it accountable, because then they will have higher standards, because they will need to keep that bar high to keep your vote. Again, I always bring back everything about politics because it's the center of society. It's the center of every debate we are having, every discussion we are having. Hell, it's in the center of what she is telling us and what Olden is thinking and sharing with everyone. It's political. It's deeply political. And it's interesting. I like that. Let's play more of the video now. A pill to make you numb. A pill to make you dumb. A pill to make you anybody else. And now I don't know why there's no sound. The dragon. Are you still with me? A dragon may not be with us anymore. So 35. Almost 35. So we'll screen share 35 because the dragon doesn't seem to be there. So there I go, screen share with the YouTubes. So there we go with 35.
Society from the post-war era changes.
There we go. Boom.
In that particularly irritated way. Oh, you think it's dumb that adults lie to each other all day long? Just grow up. Oh, you think it's a little crazy how sexed up society is? Wow, kid, grow up. You think it makes no sense to work yourself to the bone at school just so you can drive a Cadillac, play golf at the club, and ignore your wife and kids like everyone else? Seriously, you need to grow up. We've been subjected for generations now to this idea that refusing to accept society as it is somehow a sign of immaturity. I know I was told this many times throughout my life. You don't like how it is out there? Well, grow up. Life's not perfect, sweetheart. Deal with it like a big girl. Weaponized indifference.
Don't like it. Instead of fighting it, leave. Pack your bag. It's fascinating. I think we should fight until we can no longer do such thing. And then I agree. We should pack our bags. Simple as that. And I feel like if you want structural change on a deeper level, if you're not pleased with the status quo, look around, see if a country you want represent your values, what you want to do. If so, move there. If you like communists so much, why don't you pack your bag and go to China instead of promoting fucking communists in the free world? Go to Russia, ask them their experience with it. Go to North Korea, ask the people how they lived through that. Communism isn't perfect, but it's sold by the left as the solution because capitalism has failed. I think the solution is right in the middle somewhere. I think a lot of the ideas of communism are maybe okay, question mark, but I know capitalism for sure has flaws as well. I think it's better. I'd rather live in a capitalist country than a communist one because I know the communists they go on in jail. Like if you can praise one thing about the communists, they have the best social cohesion. Is it great? No, but at least they have it. Um, I think to some extent being communist is far better than having open border because at least now if someone goes out of line you not only jail them but sometimes you make them vanish literally. So again, every system has flaws. You just gotta be honest about it. Look at the world as it is and not as you wish it was. I said it so many times. I again I it crawls under my skin because I agree with a politician I hate so much that keeps referring to that, his big Davos speech. That's also laughing stock on the world stage. But hey, let's play more of that now.
Begets disenfranchised complacency, begets numbness, begets the Zoomer Doomer generation. Salinger didn't just see the writing on the wall. In a sense, he made the writing appear on the wall. The publication of The Catcher in the Rye brought out all these arguments about how Holden was some kind of a pathetic loser according to the norms and standards that would, in the future, produce an entire generation of Holden Caulfields. But
I rarely see parallels with the right and the red pill manosphere ideas. It's seen as being heretic. Food for thought. Is it really heretic? Again, I think in the manosphere there's a lot of awful and harmful idea that don't help the culture war. But ladies also push the kind of content like that, but female driven. Look at TikTok. It's the escape of toxic femininity. We all talk about toxic masculinity, but there's also a toxic femininity, you know? Both sides of the coins. We just need to be fair. Have a good depiction of a both toxic ideology that went too far. It went too far, as simple as that. Humans, they go too far. Sometimes they can't come back. And hopefully, we are not quite there yet. I know China is there. I know North Korea is there. But I don't want to lose hope quite yet on the West. I know for now the USA is one of the last few beacons of hope and freedom. And I know it's not perfect. I've heard so many bad stories about the USA. So let's play more of that now.
there's hope in that. Holden Caulfield wasn't a zombie submitting meekly to his fate. That's why he became so beloved. He was resistant. He was trying to find an escape hatch. He failed, of course, because that's the tragic nature of his entire generation. The problems with society were not going to be fixed in 1951. They were going to get much, much worse. They were going to create the world we have today. But like Holden, the low desire generation, the Zoomers, are looking out at a sterile silicone world, the final form of phoniness, and they're rejecting it. Like Holden, they're throwing off the trappings of the society that wants to stifle and destroy them.
I know a lot of Gen Z. I'm really among the youngest among the millennials. And I will tell you this: a lot of Gen Z are the way she describes, but there's also the NPCs. There's a lot of NPCs, and I think it depends how you were raised, who raised you, and your circle of friends. It's all big factors. There's a lot of Z's I know because we went at school together that I no longer talk to them because they are the NPCs, the drones, the useful idiots that think the far left is the way. They exist. But there's also a lot of people that lost faith. They don't like what the world has become, and they were promised great things, and they think they were betrayed on that. And I'd say I'd agree with that group. We were betrayed by the boomers. This is the big toxic generation that destroyed society. This all they will be remembered. They went too far. It's unfortunate, but that's what's going on. So let's play more of the video now.
Turning them into drones and social media addicts and complacent wage slaves. Whether that's this massive rejection of smart technology, the resistance to entering corporate culture, the rejection of the meaningless four-year degree with a major in college, Zoomers are increasingly turning away, as Holden did, from what a mature adult is supposed to want to do. The tragedy of Holden was that he failed. But what he saw and why it bothered him possibly resonates even more with the current generation of young adults than it did when it was published. Near the end of the book, Holden tells his sister Phoebe what he can see himself becoming. I keep picturing all these little kids playing some game in this big field of rye and all. Thousands of little kids, and nobody's around. Nobody big, I mean, except me. And I'm standing on the edge of some crazy cliff. What I have to do, I have to catch everybody if they start to go over the cliff. I mean, if they're running and they don't look where they're going, I have to come out from somewhere and catch them. That's all I do all day. I just be the catcher in the rye.
Now, I may throw accusation around, but I'm kind of worried how much he looks up at kids. I think it's weird. Just putting that out there. And she also ended that earlier in the video. And after watching that video and all of these segments she handpicked, I agree with that content creator now. That's weird. I enjoy kids and their innocence, but to make such a fixation on them, that's weird. It's very weird and off-putting. I guess we all have vices. Oh, what did they just say? It's disgusting. Let's play more of the video now.
In a way, that's exactly what Holden Caulfield became. And maybe it took a few generations, and maybe we lost a lot along the way, and maybe it had to get really bad first. But in time, people have begun to see it. Not just the problem, but the solution. And this book, with his observations and hidden tiny spark of hope, was very often the ray of...
And I will also say this. I don't think it's Gen Z that will quite bring the change. I think it's more the alphas and the betas. Because they will have parents that are the youngest millennials and the Gen Zs in some cases. And these people know how the old system was rigged and broken. So they will raise their kids another way. So I think the alphas, the betas, and the future generation, if parents don't give up on them, if they don't let them being absorbed so much by the virtual, I think the next three generation may be the shift. I mean, my sister, when I told her the government plans and wants to ban kids from using social media and YouTube and all of that kind of stuff, she was angry, and she is an alpha because she's quite young. We are almost 20 years apart because my mother got me very young. So my sister was like, "Oh, it infringes on my freedom," and I'm like, "Oh, you're right." She is socially awake in a way I wasn't at 10 years old. I had my other struggles she doesn't have now, but she is awake, and that gives me hope. That gives me hope. Even my brother, that's older than her, he is one of the youngest in the Z. I also have a lot of faith in him because he is smart in a way I wasn't at his age. There's also ways he is lacking, but overall, my brother is the future. So this is what I'm saying. In the next like 20 years, we will have a shift. The boomer will die off. We will have some of the X that will be progressive, of course, because they were raised by boomers. But we will also have the X that are more based and that realize what the boomers did, and they will try to make sure they don't push that to their grandkids the way the boomers pushed whatever they pushed to their grandkids. I think there's hope. We just need to believe in people, and people need to believe in themselves as well. Don't let the system put you down. It's bleak, but it needs to be dark to create light eventually. Let's play more of the video now.
Of light that helped people of our times understand what's wrong with our world and what we can do about it. And every time someone new opened the book and read it and related to Holden and felt their eyes opened and their minds change and filled with hope and light, Holden caught another one before they plunged over the cliff. And maybe that's the big secret.
And there's music. I don't like music. Well, I do like music, but not on my YouTube content. With that being said, I think this is the ending of that video. So, the Dragon, are you back with us? Yes. Oh, you're
Yes. Sorry, I just had myself muted.
closing thoughts.
Well, it's a good video. It's a good video, but
I loved it.
It's one of those ones of I do believe she is a liberal, but she looks at it from an objective view.
I'd see her as the center left, to be honest. Because I've seen true liberals, and they won't necessarily see what
okay. Technically, I don't know her age. If I saw her age more, like knew what it was, it would be easier to tell. I agree with some of her content, but a lot of her content is long form. But she is also educated at the same time.
Yeah.
So well, you got a lot of women who review what is called clit lit, which is their romantic, not soft core. Then you got the others that she is a book reviewer or she probably works in that field. But the thing about it is she does good content. Now, some of the videos are very long. Like the concept is like when she was talking about morning glory milk and farm. Like it's just it goes back to the idea of it's fan fiction, and then there's other stuff. Now, do I firmly believe that she is not 100% a conservative? No. I don't.
Again, I say she might be center left. So
Well, the thing is, I don't think center left exists. But
no,
that's
really, I don't think it does.
Modern terms, I don't think center left exists. I think you have. So, I'm not the type of conservative that believes. I believe you can have moderate liberals. I believe moderate liberals exist. I don't think there is such thing as center left. Because usually center left they expose their opinions the moment you ask them about a various social issue. And her herself is she stays to novels. Some are like she might be. It's like every woman that I've ever seen that's similar to that. She they are subtly liberal, but she doesn't. Being center would imply she has independent. She could be reasonable, moderate left, but if she has like example TDS, it's very well hidden.
Yeah.
But she also bashes to a degree, tries to act like a classical liberal. But classical liberals are like trying to find a near extinct species. That's the best way to put it. Because they don't exist.
Yeah.
The
So, Dragon,
it's
we are in the outro. What do you have going on your end of the internet?
currently, I went to do more streams this week, but sleep pattern got upside down, and I've just been farming stuff. So we got the boys Monday. I might actually do
Tuesday, Dragon, Tuesday.
Tuesday. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I might go into the actual finale, what I think of the series of the boys in general, because there's a lot of look. There's some parts to the finale of the boys you wouldn't touch upon it. What Kripke says, Eric Kripke, because Eric Kripke, I had this conversation. So the guy that got flown off into space was supposed to be Elon Musk, and he tweeted to Elon Musk because Elon Musk said the finale was pathetic. He said, "Oh, haha, you didn't like that I made fun of you and I had Homelander fly you off into space." That was Eric Kripke, the creator of the show.
Wow.
Yeah. The guy who got flown off into space in the final episode was supposed to be an Elon Musk allegory.
Really? I
Yeah, shocking, I know. And there's a whole thing on the boys. Like, I don't think it's the worst series, but I'll probably do
I
it.
despise season 2 and 3. They always leave a very bad.
Well, the thing is, it's supposed to be dark satire, but the problem is he tried to make it too political. But if
I like season 4 and 5 overall, but
yeah,
I just cannot stand season 2 and 3.
I'm sorry, you don't like the Ant-Man variant going into his boyfriend's and blowing him up? I'm sorry.
It was meant to be funny.
What?
It was meant to be funny. You're supposed to laugh, okay?
I'm sorry.
Not progressive.
There's shark humor. There's the point. Everyone still quotes that scene from season 3. What the fuck?
I want to forget I've seen that, okay?
There is a horrible parts of the whole show that it's not even a really good satire.
And each time they bring the freaking dick attack, it's disgusting. Bruh, like, okay, the first time it's shock value, maybe you can laugh if you have that kind of humor, but like, when it's like the third or the fourth time, it's like, bruh, joke with it, please. Anyway, you have... what do you have going on outside of what you
I have gaming content. I do have a commentary topic. Political season's going to kick up sooner rather than later. It's going to be an interesting time in a couple of months.
Bloodbath.
So, I'm currently trying to re-gear my necromancer. I meant to should do it while streaming. It is what it is. I've just been playing it most of the week.
Well. What do I have? Monday. Monday is Mandalorian and Grogu time at 5 p.m. Eastern time. I enjoyed it. It's not perfect. It has issues.
I meant to space that out.
But I liked it. And I think people are overly harsh.
Okay.
We'll see the comments. We'll see the opinion of people. Tuesday, The Boys, Season 5, episodes 6, 7, and 8. And we will also have a season discussion right after the review of all 3 episodes.
You
And it's
really,
Tuesday, 5 p.m. Eastern time. So
you need to actually the go do the analysis of the boys, because the boys is being, I'm not saying it's being used wrongly. There's a lot of parts of Kripke's interviews that are coming out. Like, it's
maybe we
no,
can react to that eventually.
you'll have to, because see, you know what's universal about the ending of the boys? People on the left, the right, and the people it's meant to make fun of don't even like it. They thought it was
That's
mid
amazing.
because the finale ended exactly the way I thought it was going to end. Some nods, but I've seen
And
progressive.
they tried to create already a spin-off, because why not?
Well, no, the Bot Rising series was already there.
But they also spoke about creating a new agency to make sure the soups.
Well, okay,
are
Gen
the
V
check.
was supposed to have a 3rd season, but the guy died. Now, the problem is that's been shelved. The trick about
Not
the
surprised.
boys is, I'll say it because we may have to look at it, because the actual discussion of post ramifications of it, it's reminded people of the inconsistency in the writing, because owning Machuds doesn't work.
Like,
The
why did we have episode 5? Anyway, Thursday, if you
Yes.
are available, Dragon.
I should do, yes.
5 p.m. Eastern time. Find us
That will be
something
better.
short, 20 to 30 minutes, because we only have 2 hours Thursday.
Okay, they're short. Yeah, I'll find.
And,
There's the areas.
and Wednesday. Wednesday is a James Bond first light at time.
Yeah.
I cannot wait. I heard bad things about the disc needing a freaking download. I think it's utterly disgusting. And that's why maybe it's the last game I will purchase in quite some time. But
What
anyway,
you're talking about? First light being what, digital or being weird?
yeah, that's
Well,
what I heard. I don't know how much of that is true, but
here's
I will
my.
have my disc, and I
Let
will
me say
see.
this. I think it's gonna be a decent game. I think it's gonna be one of those games that's.
It won't do well. I know that already.
Well, okay. It's like Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones wasn't a bad game. The question is its price point and its entry point.
Yeah. So
Because-
again, Dragon. So send me a video that we
Will
could
do.
cover Thursday. Again, we only have 2 hours Thursday, and that's
I'll
the
figure
planning
that out.
for the week.
It'd be plenty. Yeah. The thing is, good luck if you're gonna play First Light. First Light might be fine. We don't know the length of the game. It's been one of those games that has been released. I will play it at release only because it's a James Bond game. It's like playing God of War to me.
It's fun time.
It's probably gonna be. I put it at about, because here's the thing about James Bond games, like Nightfire, in that it's a little bit of action, mostly cinematics. They could shock us, and it could be 60% gameplay, 40% cinematics.
That could be interesting. Anyhow, with this, thank you people for watching that, and you know what to do. We react to things, we review movies, we
should
review
also.
TV shows, we play video games, and with this, I am out to do all of the YouTube stuff, and have a great one, and take care. See you next time.